Good morning. I'm Pedro Funari, and I'm chair of this session. I would like to start welcoming you today and say that it's a pleasure to be here to chair this session, this conference, this innovative conference by the organizers who are here. I congratulate you for the organization of this discussion. We'll have in this session two lectures by Renata Garraffoni, who is my right, and then Professor Cyril Courrier. So each of them will have 30 minutes. Then afterwards at 11 or 11:05, we'll have a discussion. So I will ask you to write down your own remarks so that we can discuss it afterwards. I remember you that this is being transmitted by YouTube and is being recorded so that will be available later on for consultation, so that questions should be on the microphone, or at least we should register here so that people can understand the question, not only the answers. And if possible, people who ask questions introduce themselves, stating the name and the institution. So it's a pleasure then to introduce Professor Renata Garraffoni, Universidade Federal do Paraná, Brazil, who will talk to us about another Roman history, Pompeian graffiti and excluded memories in the early Principate.
Good morning. Good morning. I would like. Maybe so. Okay. So now I think it's okay. Good morning. So I will first I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the importance of the conference when Julio opened it. This is, I think, a very important moment for us to share some ideas and to discuss our research and the way we have been working on it. So I'm going to read the paper I wrote, and as you're going to see, it's more kind of some kind of ideas that I've been dealing with, and so I would like to discuss it with you. So it's an ongoing research, okay? So I've been studying the graffiti on the walls of Pompeii for a very long time now. Although today it becomes the central object of my research, this has not always been the case. My first contact with the wall inscription came at the beginning of my undergraduate years by way of Funari's Cultura Popular na Antiguidade Clássica. It was through this work that I learned that the Romans wrote quite a bit, and that meant, above all, writing on the walls. It was an issue that fascinated me at the time, although my encounter with Petronius Satiricon, with the bandits and transgressors, and the intricacies of ancient literature captivated me as well. I spent the following years working on the latter theme, returning to the study of graffiti during my doctoral work on Roman gladiators. I mention this because both of these choices have something in common. The issues on Roman life that attracted me over the course of the years were related to issues of marginality and transgression. I believe that there were two factors that explain this. In first place, there was the inspiration I found in Funari's classes. in which he encouraged us to learn about another Rome, one that was not restricted to the elite, but brought to the common people and their daily lives into the foreground. In the second place, I highlight the historical and political context in which I began my studies at Universidade Estadual de Campinas, Unicamp. This was at the beginning of the decade of the 90s, 93 to be precise, and the end of the Brazilian civil military dictatorship. It was a time in which Marxist studies and the new social history were effervescent and flourishing. If on one hand I was able to get solid training in subaltern studying popular culture and resistance, on the other hand, post-structuralist and post-colonial critics, in particular from the pen of Richard Hingley, along with works attempting to deconstruct the concept of Romanization, had a profound impact on my research of this phenomenon. Thus, during my doctoral work, I underwent a transition in my theoretical framework, moving even more closely to cultural studies and post-structuralism. To think about discourses from the past as instrument of power in the present, highlighting difference and exploring otherness as a field of possibilities for critical discourse, as Foucault suggested, meant adopting political position in that it turned infuse my ways of understanding and speaking of ancient past. This brief introduction has been necessary in order to better situate the approach I intend to develop in the following pages, or here, right now. Reflection on Pompeian graffiti and their potential as evidence of the daily life of the Roman popular culture. For this purpose, studies on subalternity and language for me became fundamental. The approach I adopted here represents an attempt to discuss some of the possibilities, routes, and means for delving into debates on writing in its multiple dimensions. On this occasion, I will not go into an analysis of empirical evidence, but I will examine the characteristics of the peculiarities of the graffitis, discuss some concepts to promote what Lucy Grig signals in her work on popular culture. The need to move beyond top-down categories and construct a more authentic portrait of the Roman context in the early Principate. To this end, I take off from some reflection on how to define graffiti, and then go into theoretical discussion and suggest some ways of reading that may enable us to move forward in the debate, and not only on graffiti, but also in their potential as evidence for the study of daily life and marginality. Graffiti can be defined as incisions engraved on hard surface with a stylus, graphium, and in this sense, refer not only writing on walls, but also inscription on ceramics, for example. They can be found in a wide variety of different places. Funari asserts that in the context of tituli picti, inscription made with ink and brushes and more close to official in nature, graffiti curved with stylus may be understood as a sort of non-official intervention, unlike those meant to give visibility to announcements or to requests for payments for taxes. Rather, they deal with a wide variety of daily life matters. We are thus able to define some of the most marked characteristics. Graffiti can deal with any theme, and they are ephemeral. Our access to them is often merely serendipitous. It is a type of writing that frequently appears to be fragmented, and although much of it's written in Latin, it may also be expressed in another language. Such was the universe I encountered in my studies in the walls of Pompeii. Writing on walls is one of the most ancient resistor of humanity that we have it, and it is a component part of the communication and visual representation that people have used since our first records of rock art. Old as this may be, the symbolical and cultural meaning of the act of writing on or drawing on walls and the content they deal with change over time and place. We need only to consider how today writing on wall may result in criminal charges, something that was completely unknown in other times. This fragmentation and cultural diversity of ways of seeing and signifying the world, and even their ephemeral natures, are factors that led me to more detailed studies of graffiti on the Pompeian walls. In other words, as incomplete texts, phrases that might or might not be in dialogue one with another, I was enchanted by their destabilizing potential. Classicists frequently accustomed to discussing principles of philosophy of Western thought through the text of Roman orators, historians, philosophers, rhetoricals, and poets may be surprised by the concept's critique and of local political or reflection on life, death, and love provided by graffiti. It's precisely their fragmentation, quantity, diversity that constitutes the major challenge to those who desire to study them. Graffiti have been recorded through the Corpus Scriptionum Latinarum since the 19th century, but as they do not necessarily follow patterns of conventional scholarly writing, they did not often become object of study or were relegated to a secondary level as less relevant category of ancient inscription. Elsewhere, I have signalized and discussed a number of exceptions among studies carried out in the early 20th centuries. I have returned here to certain aspects of my arguments to demarcate the first attempts at theoretical and methodological definition that were made. I begin with Abbott and his defense to the study of language of a common people. And it was in 1912, it's important to state that. The crux of his arguments is that we know very little about them, and yet they made up a large majority of population and Roman rule. In similar vein, Cesar, in 1939, who believes that Pompeian graffiti are fundamental for a wider perspective on Roman daily life and its passions, resorts to Rostov's steps to define her position. To assert the value of the dissemination of her work and graffiti, Cesar is uninterested in the criticism of grammatical mistakes that other scholars have directed toward them. Instead, she focuses on the diversity of writers and their themes. She mentions even the presence of children and their learning how to write. Even in first glance, the common elements in this analysis of these two authors becomes evident. They seek evidence that they can enable them to study popular culture and ways to tell stories of Rome from non-elite perspective. This is why they restart Marxism studies. Diversity, daily life, and people of humble backgrounds emerge as themes and characters of their studies. The language and forms of expression of the latter were recognized in a tradition that Funari renewed and witnessed at the end of the 80s and the early 90s. Since Funari writes decades after Abbott or Cesar, in his earliest reflection, we are able to perceive themes of social history of culture, debates on circulation of ideas, and the possibility of thinking about popular ethos on the basis of this graffiti. That is, the constitution of particular form of expression with his word of views and forms of feeling. This is something he returns some years later, pointing out that although the graffiti do not provide a theoretical elaboration of life, coming as they do from the wider context in which common folk think about the world and its situation, they allow us to window to their reflection of life. Following the logic of subalterns or marginal position, other research go to examine the potential of graffiti. Williams points out It provides important documentation for the study of Roman homoerotism, and Feitosa expand our knowledge in her discussion of love and sexuality. The quick overview that I provided here encourages us to think about some of the issues that are relevant for the Pompeian wall graffiti. Yet there is still a little study on the theme. More prevalent are notes and records. Bard and Taylor mention Funari's keyhole in defining graffiti as an object of studies of daily lives of the popular culture. They signal that with his focus on caricature, for example, Funari seeks alternatives to official versions of history and construct a theoretical and methodological approach by which allow us to greater proximity to common folk. The above-mentioned authors also highlights the way in which Funari approaches to connect certain graffiti to special social groups. This approach, linking the graffiti to a particular social groups, has recently been put into wider practice, leading to a first workshop on the topic in 2008, of which Bard and Taylor's book is a result. In other words, it took more than a century after its first register for a scholar finally come together to discuss the particularity of these objects of study. Bard and Taylor's work is indicative of the progress that has been made in the field. It becomes clear that graffiti are a form of writing in which may not include a drawing, and which constitute a type of social discourse. As inscription may take on different forms, they may be seen as a system of communication in which text and drawings come together to produce a particular kind of textuality, and for that reason requires a consistent analysis with archaeological context. As a system of writing, graffiti are not limited to a particular group. Pompeii has most certainly the largest corpus of wall inscription, yet they are not to be found elsewhere as well. Finally, in the study of graffiti, we should not forget that the act of writing on the walls can have very different meaning in the past and present, and the authorship may be multiple. Above and beyond all else is the recognition of their value as a major source for study of the daily lives or memory of marginalized group. Furthermore, it's worth noting that Bard's and Taylor's statements differs from those scholars from the early 20th century in several respects. Like Abbott and Tenzer, they argue that graffiti should be considered as important evidence for access to non-elite cultures, like slave women and women who were not slaves, those who did or were not considered citizens, children, people from urban and rural areas. Thereby joining Funari and Grig and others in the notion that material and visual culture are fundamental for a more varied study of Roman society. But they also bring a greater breadth to this field of study through the discussion of language and of the graffiti in other locales that can be attributed to wealthy stratas of society. This means that graffiti today are considered of relevance to linguists, historians, and archaeologists as a rich source of material to bring us close to antiquity, and that is important to pay attention to the different contexts in which graffiti appears, as well as their meaning. Thus, we may argue that the studies of graffiti have a history that's linked to aesthetical and political conceptions of the researcher. They may be seen as vulgar and more object of curiosity, maybe, or as a point of departure for reflection on those limits of some of the approach that place exclusively emphasis on letting of the learn, and thereby of aristocracy. In this regard, if initially scholars insisted on highlighting the experience of those coming from the popular culture and their particular forms of writing, this does not mean they were unaware of the writing of people from welfare backgrounds. Rather, they believe the urgence of the discussion of Roman history beyond the emphasis in its aristocracy. In recent years, another debate, far-reaching consequences, has emerged. As a research on Roman material culture moves ahead, the study of graffiti and its particular context not only implies access to popular culture, but discussion of material culture as evidence and its potential to constitute a corpus with characteristics of its own. Graffiti as material culture who are worthy and capable of a dialogue with scholarly literature, yet should not be seen as subservient to it. In its regards, I believe that pioneers in working on this cultural form, as well as more recent scholarship on the topic, point to a multiple silence that must be questioned, in particular regarding to the context of inscription and their potential to deal with new themes, whether this means the tense relationship between archaeology and ancient history in general, or the epigraphy, on more specifically speaking. Finally, and no less important, are the new initiatives that indicate networking as a solution to the impasses that advances in the study of graffiti. If on one hand workshops have been helpful in defining the state of art, promoting debate and taking a step forward, collective projects have resignified the theme and in doing so attract young scholars to the topic. I am thinking precisely to the Ancient Graffiti project, which is available online, and its results of efforts to map graffiti. Another examples come to mind is the catalog organized by Unicamp, which helps to cover an important lacuna, presenting inscription and drawings together. I highlight these two initiatives, which can most certainly be considered the fruit of recent perception of and theoretical debate. Although studying graffiti in material context is important, early forms of compilation did not correspond to new demands. Thus, I have already stated, although graffiti were compiled in the corpus, those volumes, as Braden Taylor reminds us, do not provide us with a topographical distribution of where they are to be found, which makes their spatial perception difficult. Furthermore, the corpus usually register only the inscriptions and not the drawing that accompanies it, which is just mentioned. Graffiti appears more frequently when they are part of the text. Drawing, appears more frequently when they are part of the text. Where this is not the case, figures appears on plates, is scattered through a number of different publications. Langner trying to improve this by publishing a very complete catalog of drawings, yet Unic's work is one of the first attempts to move beyond text-image dichotomy. While Unic made an important contribution in terms of publicizing the material, an archive such as Ancient Graffiti Project is fundamental, enabling scholars from different parts of the world to engage in research and debate methods. It will also represent an attempt at spatial reconstitution of the place where inscriptions are located. It also is worth noting that, to this day, many graffiti have been catalogued only in corpus, since at the earlier time archaeologists were not preservation-minded. Other examples can be found out of context on pieces of wall that have been removed from Pompeii at the Naples Archaeological Museum. In this regard, the recent initiatives I have mentioned are initiatives of new paths that the field is taking, in which the reconstruction of spatial context has become a central element. But what is this specific contribution of reflection on spatial dimensions? In my view, whenever possible, to have the knowledge of the space where the inscriptions were engraved, expand our potential to apprehend aspects of daily life through it. In all of the above-mentioned works, from the pioneering efforts to present day, the selection of the corpus is fundamental, given the fact there are more than 11,000 graffiti have been catalogued. In many works, the selection has been made in order to organize a corpus of writing, yet not all scholars have commented on the places that the graffiti they work with was originally located. I myself, in the early days of my research, paid little attention to this, focusing more on what the public or the gladiators said. I began to perceive the importance of the context through the notion of written space in the work I carried out with Ray Lawrence in 2008. Our work was partially inspired by Keegan's consideration. In turn, Keegan's work takes some of Michel de Certeau's writings to discuss how inhabitants of a city come to relate to urban space on the basis of their own experience as pedestrians. In his approach, it is the act of walking that connects the sparse writings on the walls of the city. To read the writings on Pompeii's walls and answers with one's comments becomes a form of creating language and making and marking memory. To write the graffiti becomes an act linked to lived experience, the desires to leave the marks of one's own experience and life choices. Thus, this become to be seen as a cultural practice that creates discourse and united many actors from whom the condition of participation is ongoing conservation in some minimal knowledge of writing. Keegan's approach advances in the direction of bringing relative writing and memory together, exploring aspects of daily life in Pompeii and the past of those who lived or passed through there. Furthermore, it provides the advantage of insisting that this is only possible within a heterogeneous community with multiple values and perceptions. To adopt the position of a walker or a pedestrian seems particularly interesting to me, since it expands upon an issue that Keegan has left out of his work, yet which is highly useful. It allows us to position ourselves as scholars and producers of discourse. In this regard, if placing gladiator graffitis on combat with context means pointing out that inscriptions are often located in corridors of homes, places most likely to live be frequented by slaves, it then changes our perception not only where this narrative was situated, but also of their probable writers and meanings. It also becomes clear that the new corpus or configuration of thematic choice are born of our own eagerness to walk through the remains of ancient city of Pompeii. This has led to new studies and approach, bringing the new meanings of the circulation of ideas and experiences with language. In order to finalize these reflections, I now return to a well-known graffiti that appears in different parts of Roman Pompeii, and which reads as follows: "I admire you, O walls that has not fallen, you who must bear the burden of writers." This graffiti, in its concise irony, seems to express some of the team's idea of above quite well. In first place, it becomes evident that the person who wrote it understood the walls was a locus for many different types of writing. Here I have to deal with specifically with graffiti, but we should not forget that the city walls were also the site of official inscription, and the above-mentioned phrase makes no distinction in between them. In the second place, Keegan calls our attention to the variatio, repetition of the formula, something which is common in literature but can also be perceived as part of popular tastes, given the fact that this same graffiti was found in several different places. This seems to indicate that whoever wrote it knew the milieu and those whom it brought together, thus knowing that his or her phrase would be read by other pedestrians. The experience that circulate therein engage in a dialogue with those expressions through others, poetic forms of language. In the third place, I believe it's possible to argue that the irony contained in the phrase is not merely a play on words, but a reflection, reflects attitudes on life. Whoever acted it, bored or not, was involved in a process of thought and reflection, of construction of views of word and language. Yet, an irony of fate escaping that the writer from so long ago, the phrase has lived on the walls that have withstood earthquakes and the successive eruption of Mount Vesuvius, and the passing of time itself. In its persistent material legacy that enable us to return to the street of Pompeii and read its walls. In doing so, we not only move closer to the people of humble origins and their language or worldview, but we are also led to dialogue and reflection on what type of history of Rome's we ourselves want to write. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Renata, for your lecture, and we'll follow with Professor Cyril Courrier, who will speak French, and the text will be in this side, and the pictures will be on the other side. So that I will invite Renata to join me in the audience so that we can see, and then we'll return here at the end of the lecture. So, please.
Before to start, I'd like to thank sincerely Julio, because without him, this conference wouldn't have been possible at all. Second point, as you can see, my paper is in French. That's not only because I'm totally idle, but I thought it would have been quite easy to follow two different languages on screen and orally. So let's begin. In French. Peut-on pour l'Antiquité non pas seulement prendre en compte les masses anonymes, mais aussi les comprendre à la lumière de leur propre expérience et de leur réaction à cette expérience? Peut-on faire l'histoire des points de vue subalternes et retrouver les valeurs et les normes qui sous-tendirent leurs actions? Posées de cette manière très thomsonienne, de telles interrogations, déjà soulevées par Julio en introduction, revêtent un caractère éminemment paradoxal. Surtout, elles reflètent les difficultés qui sont les nôtres à faire cette histoire à hauteur d'homme, reflet d'un état des sources, mais aussi de leur exploitation. En effet, et cela a été dit plusieurs fois par Costas, par Julio, il est bien connu que la documentation disponible jette un éclairage nourri sur les élites et en émane souvent. Elle ne s'intéresse que trop rarement aux strates inférieures. En outre, l'approche des auteurs anciens était avant tout morale, profondément aristocratique. Ils ne mentionnaient le rôle des masses que lorsque leur comportement s'inscrivait dans une crise plus générale à même d'attirer l'attention de leurs lecteurs, dont les centres d'intérêt ne tournaient qu'autour des grands événements qui avaient fait de Rome la capitale qu'ils connaissaient. La foule, certaines fois plebs, d'autres fois populus, mais très souvent multitudo, turba, vulgus, n'étaient décrites que pour mieux dénoncer son indignité et sa versatilité. La plèbe de Rome, incarnation des excès de la civilisation, otium, dépendance, salariat, luxe grec, passion pour les jeux, s'opposait ainsi aux élites, notamment sénatoriales, garantes de la libertas et dépositaires de l'histoire de Rome dont elles firent l'écriture. C'est la raison pour laquelle cette conception fut aussi celle de nombreux historiens modernes qui, jusqu'à une date relativement récente, acceptèrent sans réserve les jugements de ces auteurs antiques, si bien que lorsqu'ils s'aventuraient au-delà du milieu des élites et du terrain bien balisé par les sources littéraires, ils s'en tenaient à des propos essentialistes sur l'homme romain, largement dénués de contextualisation chronologique et sociale. J'ajouterai au passage, on se rappellera tous de la pyramide d'Alfoldi, qui en est l'exemple le plus symptomatique. Zwijawec le premier montra les limites de ce portrait caricatural des foules. Et depuis ses travaux fondateurs, dans la veine des avancées permises par un sociologue comme Richard Hoggart ou un historien moderniste comme Thomson, les spécialistes de l'Antiquité ont majoritairement reconsidéré l'analyse qui pouvait être faite de l'ours. Ils ne croient plus à une masse de Lazzaroni sans caractère ni principe, à une ville de fainéants, à une masse indifférenciée et totalement dépersonnalisée. Et de fleurir récemment les études sur les stratifications internes des foules urbaines, mais aussi du Rome, mais aussi du monde romain. Mentionnons les ordines de Claude Nicolet, tout est au tableau, des ordines de Claude Nicolet à la middle class d'Edward Mayer, en passant par la plebs media de Paul Venn jusqu'au colloque récemment tenu à Rome, tout spécialement consacré à la fragmentation socio-économique des milieux plébéiens. Ces travaux ont procédé dans des perspectives très différentes, d'une même volonté, née dans les années 80, de penser l'agencement de groupes très hétérogènes, dont l'identification et les contours n'ont cessé d'être affinés au cours des dernières années. En effet, dans les sociétés du monde romain, les facteurs de hiérarchie étaient multiples, synchroniques et non parallèles. Il suffit de penser aux oppositions statutaires, naissance servile ou ingénue, ou civiques, jouissance de la citoyenneté, appartenance à un ordre privilégié, aux structurations socio-économiques qui se posent en termes de ressources et de rapport au travail, journaliers, salariés, maîtres artisans, entrepreneurs, voire aux pratiques culturelles. De ce point de vue, et comme l'a prudemment rappelé Lucie dans l'introduction d'un ouvrage collectif dont on a parlé plusieurs fois, consacré aux cultures populaires antiques, we need to avoid viewing Roman society in terms of a tiny elite atop huge non-differentiated non-elite. Dès lors, le moment semble propice pour poser une question très actuelle dans les débats historiques. Who is below? En effet, introduit par Thomson, le concept d'history from below a récemment connu un regain d'intérêt consistant moins à se demander comment, ou du moins autant comment réaliser une history from below, qu'à réfléchir en empruntant le langage utilisé par Mark Aylwood dans le forum inauguré en 2013, à qui est ce bas dont il s'agit de reconstituer l'histoire. Sans nécessairement se revendiquer explicitement des travaux et méthodes élaborés par ce courant d'études, des spécialistes de l'Antiquité, et notable est le fait que la plupart en fait, sont ici ou associés à ce colloque, ont déjà tenté de répondre à cette question en recourant aux sources produites par les intéressés et en déplaçant l'analyse sur le terrain des identités, autrement dit en prenant en compte la conscience que les Romains eux-mêmes pouvaient avoir de ces différentes hiérarchies et de leurs relations contradictoires, en se positionnant donc au niveau des individus et surtout du regard qu'ils pouvaient porter sur leur propre situation et celle de leurs pairs ou de leurs supérieurs. Ainsi, le monde des métiers, notamment l'ouvrage de Nicolas Trane qui a rédigé avec moi cette communication, j'ai oublié de le mentionner, je suis désolé, la plèbe de Rome ou encore les milieux populaires d'Afrique du Nord, il y en aurait d'autres, je ne suis centré sur Rome, ont récemment fait l'objet d'enquêtes approfondies qui ont permis de redessiner et complexifier l'ordonnancement des différentes couches inférieures de la société romaine. Un même souci a guidé notre recherche, la mienne et celle de Nicolas Trane donc, sur la Gaule méridionale, en particulier sur ceux que, de prime abord, l'on pourrait qualifier de subalternes, car appartenant à la grande majorité de la population étrangère aux élites des cités et de l'Empire. Cette zone géographique a pour grand intérêt de fournir une documentation épigraphique d'une indéniable richesse en comparaison d'autres régions de l'Occident romain et au-delà des limites inhérentes à ce type de sources. La Gaule méridionale, en réalité la province de Narbonnaise, à qui l'on peut adjoindre la ville limitrophe de Lyon, compte des gisements épigraphiques parmi les plus abondants de l'Empire romain. Narbonne, Nîmes, Arles, Lyon, mais aussi d'autres cités de moindre envergure, livrent des milliers d'inscriptions à étudier. Or, parmi elles, d'un point de vue qualitatif, les groupes sociaux subalternes occupent une place de choix. Ainsi, l'épigraphie des grands ports maritimes, fluvio-maritimes et fluviaux, éclaire beaucoup mieux qu'ailleurs le monde des métiers urbains, de l'artisanat et du commerce. À travers ce milieu, une frange de la population servile, composée d'esclaves et d'affranchis qui travaillaient aux côtés d'ingénus, nous est assez bien connue. Au-delà des grandes places de commerce, la richesse de l'épigraphie de Gaule méridionale concerne également l'intérieur des terres et des sociétés nées de la coexistence d'éléments indigènes et exogènes. Dans cette région, bouleversée par l'implantation de colons romains, aux époques césariennes ou triumvirales en particulier, les subalternes, ce sont aussi les simples incolae, ces Gaulois traités comme des habitants de second rang dans ou à côté des colonies romaines. De ce fait, la Gaule méridionale est un bon observatoire de la multiplicité et donc de la complexité des hiérarchies qui structuraient les sociétés de l'Empire. Pour s'en persuader, prenons le cas de Narbonne. Dès le milieu du IIe siècle avant Jésus-Christ, la ville, liée à un port, abrite une société déjà complexe, au peuplement divers. Puis, autour de 118-116 avant Jésus-Christ, la fondation d'une colonie de citoyens romains bouleverse la situation. Certes, la condition sociale des colons qui provenaient eux-mêmes d'horizons géographiques différents, Ombrie, Picénum, Étrurie, Latium, Campanie, et sociaux divers, se définit dans un rapport de domination avec les populations locales. Toutefois, la société narbonnaise, comme celle d'Arles, ne se résuma jamais à un simple face-à-face colonial, notamment parce que Narbonne devint rapidement un lieu d'attraction pour des hommes d'affaires italiens et un nœud de communication commerciale en Occident. Dès lors, dans cette cité aux multiples facettes en particulier, en Gaule méridionale en général, déterminer qui est ce bas, ou plutôt qui est en bas, ressemble vite à une gageure. Mais l'appréhension surgit précisément parce que la Gaule méridionale apparaît comme un espace où une telle enquête paraît possible, voire féconde. Inversement, elle ne peut pas faire l'économie d'une attention aiguë prêtée aux biais induits par nos sources, sur lesquels nous concentrerons pour cette raison la communication. Un premier problème est pour ainsi dire lié à la nature même de notre documentation. En effet, l'épigraphie laisse une place de choix à des hommes d'affaires de haute volée qui occupaient le sommet des sociétés portuaires au détriment des petits marchands et autres détaillants. Autrement dit, cherchez des Romains subalternes et paradoxalement, vous ne trouverez guère que l'élite ou les élites des gens subalternes. L'affranchi, alors par exemple, l'affranchi et sévir augustal arlésien, Gaius Paquius Pardalas, fut une figure emblématique de ce milieu, même si son autel funéraire en marbre ne le définit pas explicitement comme un négociator. Néanmoins, sa condition personnelle et ses relations avec divers corps de métier tentent à le désigner comme tel. Les charpentiers de marine, les utriculaires, des professionnels du transport, et les centenaires, des professionnels du textile, le choisirent comme patron. Or, ces titres soulignent le poids des relations verticales dans la hiérarchisation de la plèbe d'Arles. Les relations de ce type structuraient les milieux sociaux intermédiaires à l'échelle non seulement de la ville, mais aussi de la civitas arlésienne. Ainsi, l'armateur Marcus Frontonius Euporus, alors je suis désolé, je n'ai que la photo du CIL parce que tout simplement la pierre est perdue, fut le patron non seulement des nautes de la Durance, basée à Arles, mais aussi des utriculaires d'Ernaginum, une bourgade environnante. Le rayonnement de ce curateur des naviculaires d'Arles dépassait le cadre de la colonie, puisque la cité d'Aix-en-Provence lui décerna le titre de sévir augustal. À Narbonne aussi, les commerçants au long cours constituaient l'élite des milieux subalternes, à l'image de Publius Aulitius Apollonius, naviculaire au service de la nonne, puis négociator, honoré au milieu du IIe siècle par les sévires augustaux dont il faisait lui-même partie. À Lyon, le sommet de la hiérarchie plébéienne se confond avec le milieu des nautes négociants. Ainsi, Marcus Intatius Vitalis, négociant en vin et nautes de la Saône, fut aussi patron de ces deux collèges, ainsi que de celui des utriculaires lyonnais. Il obtint surtout un privilège qui le rapprocha des élites de la cité. L'ordo municipal d'Alba, en Ardèche, lui avait permis d'assister aux fêtes civiques parmi les décurions. Il fut enfin patron des equites, on ne sait pas ce que ça veut dire, et patron des sévires, parmi lesquels comptèrent par exemple les nautes Marcus Primius Secundianus et Tutius Inquitatus, ainsi que le naviculaire marin Quintus Capitonius Probator, qui avait obtenu le sévirat à Puzzol, signe de l'extension de ses affaires. Dès lors, peut-on réellement compter ces élites négociantes parmi les Romains subalternes ? La question pourrait paraître étrange, car les documents qui font connaître ces professionnels visent précisément à les identifier comme des individus exceptionnels, et en particulier comme supérieurs aux membres des collectivités clientes. Faut-il donc exclure les négociatores et les naviculaires du décompte des Romains subalternes et de l'History from Below ? Pourquoi pas, mais en multipliant ce genre d'exclusion, notre étude serait bientôt privée d'objet, ou presque. En outre, cette démarche serait contestable sur le fond, car elle ne prêterait pas une attention suffisante à la nature des épitaphes conservées et au parcours individuel accompli. Comme beaucoup d'armateurs et d'hommes d'affaires arlésiens, par Dallas, Euporus et Centut Apollonius à Narbonne furent des esclaves qui s'élevèrent dans leur société d'origine dans les années postérieures à leur affranchissement. À 2 reprises, Vitalis signale qu'il a été membre ordinaire des associations, qu'il finit par diriger et même protéger. La question n'est donc pas seulement de juger s'ils étaient subalternes ou non à leur mort, mais de tenter aussi de déterminer à partir de quand ils auraient cessé d'être subalternes. Il est indéniable que les sources conservées, et l'épigraphie en particulier, livrent de la population des cités une image déformée. Il s'agit d'une image lisse, dans laquelle n'apparaissent que des individus assez aisés ou favorisés d'une manière ou d'une autre. Pire, la société romaine étant structurée par l'existence d'une multiplicité de fines hiérarchies, il ne suffit pas de décaler verticalement son regard d'un milieu à un autre pour considérer une couche inférieure ou supérieure et prétendre accéder aux strates subalternes. Les hiérarchies étaient multiples, d'où l'impression récurrente de n'accéder qu'à la fraction supérieure de chaque milieu. Le cas des esclaves est exemplaire, car au-delà d'une commune infériorité de nature juridique, sur le plan socio-économique, la documentation met les mieux lotis en valeur. À Arles, les ministries Laribus de Trinquetaille, donc un quartier particulièrement commerçant, apparaissent, à travers les ministries Laribus de Trinquetaille, apparaissent des esclaves d'époque augustéenne, disposant d'un pécule important grâce à la bienveillance de leur maître. En effet, quelques esclaves étaient régulièrement désignés comme desservants des Compitalia, la fête annuelle des Lars. Or, certaines années, les ministres des Lars formaient un petit groupe assez riche pour financer un monument commémoratif sous la forme d'un autel ou d'une plaque de marbre qu'ils installaient dans leur sanctuaire. Et de manière générale, j'ajouterais que l'épigraphie des esclaves à Arles est quasiment invisible. On a 900 inscriptions qui éclairent les milieux non élitistes d'Arles et seulement, je crois, une vingtaine provenant d'esclaves. C'est vraiment très très peu. À Narbonne, le Collegium Salutare Familiae Tabellariorum Caesaris Nostri, une association de messagers impériaux, se prêterait à semblable analyse. Malgré sa modestie, le texte qui les fait connaître, une pièce d'enclos funéraire, venait fermer une concession grande comme 2 terrains de football. En somme, l'épigraphie assure la plus grande visibilité à des individus qui ont souhaité mettre un titre ou une fonction distinctive en avant. Les ministries laribus sont de ceux-là, de même que les sewiri augustales, à une époque un peu plus basse et dans un milieu social supérieur. Parce que leurs mentions n'avaient rien de systématique, les noms de métiers apparaissent également comme des attributs distinctifs. Au-delà de l'affichage épigraphique, les savoirs professionnels distinguaient une minorité d'individus de la masse des travailleurs non qualifiés. Cela valait pour la population servile, comme parmi les hommes libres. Les esclaves arlésiens Peregrinus et Dionysius purent se targuer de leurs qualités respectives de trésoriers et de médecins. À Narbonne, le tombeau de l'Argentarius Quintus Fuficus lui fut offert par 2 de ses esclaves ou anciens esclaves, laissés dans l'anonymat de leurs conditions juridiques et dénués de savoir-faire professionnel, à tout le moins du point de vue de l'affichage épigraphique. Où sont les Romains subalternes? Où sont les travailleurs sans qualification? Ils étaient pourtant indispensables à la bonne marche de l'économie portuaire, comme en témoignent notamment les milliers de tessons d'amphores découverts dans le Tibre. Une foule devenue anonyme assurait le déchargement des marchandises. Ainsi, le stockage, leur reconditionnement et leur réexpédition à partir du point de rupture de charge que constituait le port fluvial. De Cabrières d'Aigues, près d'Aix-en-Provence, c'est celui-là, provient un bas-relief qui peut apparaître comme une rare et modeste exception à cette invisibilité. Mais daté du IIe siècle et figurant une scène de halage sur la Durance, d'une barque chargée de tonneaux et d'amphores, il ornait sans doute le mausolée d'un riche transporteur, un négociator ou un propriétaire terrien, dont on entrevoit dans la partie supérieure, à la forme de l'attelage, ici, le confort du voyage ou les trajets entre le domaine et la ville dans sa voiture légère. À Arles, le célèbre relief des débardeurs, les déchargeurs, se prête à semblable analyse, tout comme celui de Colonzelle, à l'est de Saint-Paul-Trois-Châteaux, la capitale des Tricastini, où l'on aperçoit le sommet d'une cargaison chargée sur une barque équipée d'un mât de halage ou d'un port ou d'où part un câble. À Narbonne, les saccarii, les porteurs de sacs, et autres transbordeurs ne sont de même attestés que par l'iconographie et figurés dans la tenue habituelle des esclaves. Les individus qui orchestrèrent ce genre de mise en scène du travail subalterne n'avaient sûrement rien de manutentionnaire. Être ordinaire, c'était donc se fondre dans la masse, être invisible, individuellement du moins. En ce sens, les mentions épigraphiques des Romains subalternes sont furtives, car collectives, et donc pauvres en informations. Ainsi, derrière les Decumani narbonenses, les Sextani arelatenses ou les Septimani baeterenses, donc Narbonne, Arles et Béziers, se profilent les simples descendants de colons qui honorèrent leurs patrons successifs. Certes, ces noms participant de la mémoire collective des colonies romaines désignaient l'ensemble du corps civique arlésien. Certes, la population lotie à Narbonne, Arles ou Béziers dut constituer un ensemble hétérogène dès leur installation. Cependant, le fait de se reconnaître dans ces appellations traduit la fierté de descendre de vétérans récompensés de leur bravoure au terme de glorieuses campagnes. À l'échelle des métiers du IIe et du début du IIIe siècle, une ligne de démarcation passe entre les activités exercées par des individus assez aisés pour sortir régulièrement de l'anonymat et les autres, connus uniquement par des témoignages collectifs. Ainsi, à Arles, les naviculaires apparaissent à la fois individuellement et collectivement, à la différence, par exemple, des lénunculaires et des centenaires. Les premiers étaient des bateliers qui assuraient notamment des liaisons entre le port fluvial et ses avant-ports maritimes. Ils ne sont connus que depuis 2007 par cet autel dédié collectivement au génie de leur corpus et par une statue de Neptune offerte par un de leurs bienfaiteurs, Publius Petronius Asclepiades. De même, Les professionnels du textile, les centenaires, ne sont connus que par le truchement d'un patron, celui qu'on a vu tout à l'heure, Gaius Paquius Pardalas. Leur secteur économique devait pourtant être dynamique, compte tenu de l'intensité des activités pastorales pratiquées dans la plaine de la Crau. De manière plus générale, les membres ordinaires des corps de métier restent souvent dans l'ombre. Même s'il y a des exceptions, parmi le corpus des fabri tignuarii notamment, l'épigraphie tente à assurer davantage de visibilité aux responsables des associations qu'à leurs plèbes. Au IIe siècle, les communautés de ce type constituaient un cadre essentiel du tissu social arlésien et sans doute étaient-elles encore plus nombreuses que ne l'indiquent les inscriptions connues à ce jour. Cependant, là encore, toutes n'étaient pas du même niveau social. Une visibilité épigraphique tout à fait inégale suggère que les fabri nawales, les fabri tignuarii et les utricularii étaient sans doute d'un rang supérieur à celui des lapidarii almanticenses, des centonarii ou des lenuncularii. Sans doute en allait-il de même de la visibilité dans l'espace urbain et du lustre de leur lieu de réunion, leur scolei. La notion de romain subalterne présente encore un caractère paradoxal dès lors que l'on change d'échelle. Par exemple, l'homme de métier arlésien apparaît très souvent comme un corporatus, un membre de collège. C'est nettement moins évident, par exemple, à Narbonne, pour des raisons documentaires sans doute. L'épigraphie de Narbonne est plus précoce et vraisemblablement antérieure au plus grand développement des associations en Gaule, durant les IIe et IIIe siècles. Toutefois, même en se concentrant sur cette période, un foisonnement similaire ne se retrouve pas dans les mêmes proportions à Narbonne et à Arles. Notre perception de ce que peut être un romain subalterne s'en trouve inévitablement modifiée. Les hiérarchies dans lesquelles s'insèrent ces individus ne présentent pas le même agencement. Elles purent aussi condamner à l'oubli des hommes de métier particulièrement humbles qui ne parvenaient à la visibilité épigraphique que dans le cadre des collèges, à l'image des professionnels du transport fluvial, inconnus en contexte narbonnais. Dans le même temps, on peut aussi se demander si le moindre développement des collèges n'a pas pu niveler le tissu social en limitant l'émergence et la visibilité d'individus plus remarquables et moins ordinaires, moins subalternes, on pourrait dire, que d'autres. Sous cet angle, le romain subalterne, ou plutôt le romain moyen, est peut-être moins difficile à repérer dans la capitale de la province que dans le grand port arlésien. Toutefois, et comme précédemment, l'analyse se doit, dans la mesure du possible, de reconstituer les trajectoires. Le dossier des Vétieni de Narbonne est particulièrement assez intéressant à cet égard. Caius Vetenius Titus Filius, donc un ingénu de la tribu, inscrit dans la tribu Polia, la tribu des premiers colons de Narbonne, avait exercé la profession de mensularius, de banquier, à Narbonne dans la dernière décennie du 1er siècle avant Jésus-Christ. La mention de la tribu Polia en fait un boutiquier dont les origines s'inscrivent dans la population de la première colonie, descendants de colons ou immigrés précocement attirés par la prospérité de la région. Son profil socio-économique est typique de l'épigraphie de Narbonne. Caractérisé par une certaine aisance, il possédait des esclaves, et l'affichage d'une fierté professionnelle indéniable. Une attention prêtée à sa descendance est tout aussi intéressante. Son affranchi, Métrodorus, eut lui-même un affranchi, Eros, dont la richesse peut être évaluée à l'aune de sa propre épitaphe. Il put épouser une ingénue, si bien que l'on l'a imaginé en homme de patrimoine foncier. L'ascension sociale serait suggestive. L'affranchi héritier est entré dans le monde des ingénus en même temps qu'il changeait de milieu social. Dans ce cas précis, des hiérarchies parallèles présentèrent un agencement concordant, mais c'était loin d'être toujours le cas. En raison du manque de sources et de la multiplicité des hiérarchies qui ont finement stratifié les milieux plébéiens, l'historien de l'Antiquité se trouve donc dans une situation délicate pour penser ce bas. Il effleure une complexité qu'il a du mal à ordonner de manière simple. Mais ne se méprend-on pas en s'interrogeant sur les Romains dont les inscriptions évoquent les titres décernés par la cité ou des associations professionnelles, ou encore le statut de travailleur spécialisé? Les Romains subalternes ne sont-ils pas justement les sans-grades, dépourvus de toute qualité distinctive mise en avant par l'épigraphie, à l'image de ces nombreuses épitaphes, simples dans leur forme, des stèles à fronton arrondi comme dans leur texte, et qui ne véhiculent bien souvent que les noms du défunt, sans autre précision sur le métier, la famille, l'appartenance à une collectivité ou le rang social. Une réponse affirmative à ces questions n'est encore une fois guère réjouissante, puisqu'elle aboutirait au constat que les Romains subalternes sont par essence impossibles, condamnés à échapper à toute connaissance précise. À cet égard, séduisante est l'approche proposée par le linguistic turn, qui fait du langage le seul objet d'étude légitime, l'élément constitutif de la configuration sociale. Dans un article récent consacré à une relecture de l'œuvre de Thomson, Simona Cerutti a ainsi proposé d'élargir le concept d'history from below à ceux qui précisément avaient perdu cette bataille du langage et s'étaient retrouvés pour des motifs divers en position de faiblesse momentanée, quel que soit leur rang. Ils avaient perdu la bataille pour la légitimité, faisant en quelque sorte du subalterne un oublié de l'histoire. De ce point de vue, le Romain subalterne ne serait-il pas celui qui a perdu la bataille de l'affichage épigraphique? Ce type d'analyse présente-t-il un intérêt heuristique? La réponse est plus nuancée qu'il n'y paraît, car le paradigme de la communication tend à dissoudre les stratifications sociales dans les stratégies discursives. Raisonner en termes de culture et d'idéologie de groupe n'y relève au mieux que d'un regard éthique, c'est-à-dire extérieur, d'une construction intellectuelle, étrangère au regard des contemporains. Pourtant, le regard éthique n'est-il pas justement celui qui prête aux acteurs sociaux la volonté de mener une bataille, je reprends le vocabulaire de Simona Cerutti, dont ils n'ont sans doute jamais eu conscience? En ce sens, même la catégorie, voire la non-catégorie des sans-grades, donne des signes d'hétérogénéité et de hiérarchie. Ainsi, parmi les monuments funéraires d'Arles, se détache une petite série de stèles funéraires à portrait, fabriquées dans la première moitié du 1er siècle. L'une fut acquise par l'affranchie Quilla, pour elle et sa patronne, laquelle connut aussi la condition d'esclave dans la première moitié de sa vie. Marcus Iulius Félix, affranchi de Marcus, en acheta une autre de son vivant pour marquer la sépulture qu'il partagea avec ses proches. Ces stèles finement sculptées devaient être des objets de prix, si bien qu'il paraît impossible de classer leurs commanditaires parmi les plus pauvres. Et rien ne prouve que leur absence de titre et la sobriété du formulaire funéraire découlent d'une condition inférieure à celle d'un membre d'association patentée ou d'un travailleur spécialisé désireux d'être présenté comme tel. Certes, la qualité d'un monument constitue un marqueur social très grossier, car rien ne dit que le goût prononcé ou la relative indifférence à l'égard de ce type d'objet était proportionnelle à la richesse des uns et des autres, mais il en allait de même pour l'appétence pour les titres civiques et leur affichage, comme de la volonté de faire figurer son métier sur sa pierre tombale. Par ailleurs, deuxième point par rapport au linguistic turn, peut-on s'affranchir purement et simplement des cultures de groupe? Si l'on entend l'argument qui fait du langage un élément constitutif de la cohésion sociale, raisonner en termes de hiérarchie ne relève pas pour autant d'un regard éthique. Il nous semblerait même plutôt que dans une société comme celle du monde romain, il faudrait dire plutôt au pluriel d'ailleurs, dans des sociétés comme celle du monde romain, la démarche féconde consiste au contraire à raisonner en termes de sentiment d'appartenance à des entités dont il s'agirait de retrouver les contours et l'agencement relatif, malgré le manque ou le non-dit des sources, à l'image de ce qui a été récemment proposé pour la plebs média dans la capitale. Il est une chose de considérer imprudemment l'appartenance proclamée à un groupe social, je suis d'accord que ça peut procéder de phénomènes discursifs, il en est une autre de réduire l'existence de ces mêmes groupes à une stratégie discursive construite par le langage. Bien au contraire, l'expérience des subalternes apparaît aussi, pas toujours, on a vu hier que c'était plus fluide qu'il n'y paraissait, mais apparaît aussi comme déterminée par le poids des relations verticales que nous avons évoquées. Elle constitue même la richesse d'une approche qui consiste à intégrer cette verticalité à l'analyse et à faire d'une limite une possibilité. Dans le cadre de cette communication, je ne prendrai que 2 exemples, l'un d'assimilation de cette verticalité, l'autre de réaction à celle-ci. Il est une curiosité de la ville d'Arles qui n'a pas manqué de surprendre l'historien moderne. L'absence totale ou quasi totale de negociatores et de mercatores. On a une cité qui compte 900 inscriptions, dont plusieurs centaines de métiers, dans un grand port du monde romain, et il n'y a aucune inscription de negociatores. En réalité, il y en a une qui a été découverte récemment et que j'ai publiée il y a 1 an. Mais c'est une exception parce qu'elle évoque des negociantes dans le port de Fos, qui était l'un des avant-ports d'Arles. Dans le port fluvial d'Arles, il n'y en a strictement aucune. Comment rendre compte d'une telle situation qui contraste fortement avec Lyon, Narbonne ou même Ostie, où on en a des dizaines? Le hasard des découvertes ne saurait expliquer à lui seul cette étrangeté. Une hypothèse récemment avancée par mon acolyte absent consiste à penser qu'ils auraient volontairement tué leurs engagements commerciaux. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils avaient une dimension plus valorisable de leur identité sociale à promouvoir, celle de sévir Augusto. En effet, une étude prosopographique antérieure a cru déceler un clivage dans le monde du travail arlésien. L'anthroponymie invite à distinguer 2 groupes. Les cognomina latins sont bien représentés dans le premier, celui de gauche, qui rassemble des individus exerçant d'autres métiers que l'armement maritime et le commerce. En revanche, 2 naviculaires connus sur 3 portent des cognomina grecs, de même que les 3/4 des sévires Augusto. Il est d'autant plus vraisemblable que de tels professionnels se cachent derrière les sévires Augusto, attestés, et en particulier derrière ceux qui cumulaient richesse et mobilité géographique. La proportion d'ingénus aurait été plus élevée dans des métiers comme la construction, la charpenterie marine ou le transport fluvial par exemple, qui pouvaient garantir une certaine aisance. En revanche, la proportion d'affranchis aurait été plus élevée dans les métiers les plus lucratifs de l'armement maritime et du grand commerce. Ces activités demandaient en effet des capitaux que de riches patrons pouvaient fournir. Or, ce type de commerce était si rémunérateur qu'il pouvait permettre à leurs acteurs d'échapper à leurs conditions et au mépris aristocratique qui pesait sur leur métier et le statut de ceux qui le pratiquaient. Cicéron, vous le savez bien, en donne une bonne illustration dans un célèbre passage du De Officiis, et ce paragraphe, qui s'insère lui-même dans une tradition de valorisation de la terre et des activités agricoles, rappellera inévitablement l'histoire inventée de Trimalchion, qui, après avoir fait fortune, s'était retiré des affaires pour exercer le métier, entre guillemets, de grand propriétaire. Autrement dit, la mercatura n'était honorable que si le profit généré était réinvesti dans la terre, si bien que transparaît derrière ces sévires Augusto arlésiens, qui ne faisaient pas mention de l'origine de leur fortune, le poids de relations sociales verticales qui les poussait à intérioriser des normes tout aristocratiques dans une attitude de mimétisme à l'égard des élites civiques. Mais ce qui était valable pour l'élite des milieux plébéiens l'était-il pour toute la plèbe? Je ne le tiendrais absolument pas pour acquis. La fierté professionnelle dont les gens de métier font preuve suggère par exemple une disposition d'esprit qui pouvait nettement varier d'une strate à l'autre de la hiérarchie sociale. En outre, le poids des relations verticales ne passait pas uniquement entre élite économique et simples travailleurs. Il innervait l'intégralité du tissu social, proposant même parfois une surprenante inversion des hiérarchies attendues, comme le suggère l'inscription des Pagi Lucreti. Alors, le dessin du XVIe siècle que l'on a conservé, puisque l'inscription est perdue, et la transcription qu'on peut en faire aujourd'hui. Les Pagani Pagi Lucreti, donc les habitants du Pagus de Lucretius, vivaient aux marges du territoire arlésien, à l'opposé du chef-lieu de la colonie. à près de 80 km. Leur bourgade, établie autour de Saint-Jean-de-Garguier et de Guéménos, dans la vallée de l'Uvonne, a laissé plusieurs épitaphes de pérégrins du 1er siècle et de citoyens romains de fraîche date au siècle suivant. Or, une inscription gravée sous ou peu après le principat d'Antonin le Pieux, au IIe siècle donc, révèle que ces habitants des confins peinaient à se faire reconnaître l'accès gratuit au terme du chef-lieu que leur qualité d'Arlésien devait pourtant leur garantir. C'est le sens de cette inscription. Ils remercient quelqu'un d'avoir permis qu'il puisse continuer à avoir l'accès gratuit au bain d'Arles. Les habitants d'Arles et les autorités coloniales devaient avoir du mal à reconnaître comme de parfaits compatriotes des Gaulois issus de campagnes éloignées. Pourtant, la promotion juridique de leur collectivité était vieille de 4 décennies. Les tensions et les négociations évoquées montrent la difficulté des Pagani à obtenir d'être traités sur un pied d'égalité et non comme des Arlésiens de seconde zone. Or, le profil de l'individu qui les aida dans leur démarche est remarquable également. Ces descendants de pérégrins et donc d'hommes libres se donnent un ancien esclave pour protecteur, en la personne du sévir augustal Quintus Cornelius Zosimus. S'agissait-il d'un négociateur retiré à la campagne après avoir fait fortune, on n'en sait rien, et Zosimus pourrait tout aussi bien avoir été le procurateur d'un riche propriétaire foncier. En tout cas, ce personnage fut sûrement choisi pour sa haute condition et sa dignité civique de sévir augustal. Elles en faisaient un personnage extraordinaire au sein du pagus, et ce seul exemple illustre, je trouve, comment des hiérarchies distinctes pouvaient à la fois s'entrecroiser et donner un caractère relatif à chacune d'elles. Il illustre aussi le poids des relations verticales entre groupes préexistants sur la vie quotidienne de Romains subalternes. Enfin, il jette groupes qui n'étaient pas enfermants, qu'on s'entende. Ils existent, mais ils ne sont pas enfermants. Ils sont fluides dans leur façon de fonctionner. Enfin, il jette une lumière furtive sur les stratégies qui pouvaient être celles de ces Romains subalternes pour compenser tel ou tel aspect de leur infériorité, en faisant jouer entre elles les hiérarchies et leur place au sein de ces hiérarchies. Loin d'avoir formé une masse indifférenciée, totalement dépersonnalisée, les milieux plébéiens de Gaule méridionale, et j'allais dire du monde romain, apparaissent au contraire comme un monde finement stratifié et traversé de multiples tensions. Or, la nature même de notre documentation favorise la visibilité d'individus exceptionnels au détriment des Romains les plus subalternes. Elle contribue également à complexifier notre vision de ce que pourrait être un Romain subalterne, de même qu'elle obscurcit la façon de penser cette complexité. Les solutions proposées par le linguistic turn me paraissent alors conduire qu'à des apories, c'est exagéré, présenter des dangers plutôt. Dans une société aussi normative que la société romaine, il est réducteur d'affirmer que seule l'action crée le groupe, comme j'ai pu le lire par exemple dans l'article de Simona Cerruti. Je crois au contraire que l'approche la plus féconde consiste à accepter la complexité hiérarchiste dans l'analyse des expériences plébéiennes, même s'il est vrai que manque à l'heure actuelle une conceptualisation générale des rapports sociaux qui prennent en compte le point de vue, l'identité sociale des acteurs et arrivent à reconstituer les interpénétrations des hiérarchies telles que les Romains les voyaient, tout en serriant, parce que c'est essentiel, ce qui relevait de stratégies discursives et ce qui procédait de sentiments d'appartenance réels, j'ai envie de dire. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much for your lecture. I will have a brief comment for start the discussion. Then I will pass the word for the audience to react. And I will suggest, I don't know if it was the case yesterday, but I would suggest that people would comment, and then at the end, each of you will try to address all the issues so that more people can talk. Well, I've written a brief comment. I read it. Both lectures raise a series of epistemological and empirical issues and are thus relevant to ancient history, the focus of this conference, but also to social theory in general. In this brief comment, I will raise some of them in both theoretical and methodological empirical issues. In social theory, the main issue relates to the character of Roman society: agency, social mobility, social network, conflict. Even if all those are human and transcultural, being relevant even in classless societies, they are even more so in class ones, acutely so in a complex one as the Roman. Agency encapsulates social mobility, or otherwise, social networking and limits and complexity, and transgression and conflict and compliance. Agency is a key concept of modern social theory, considering that everybody has at least some command on his or her life and social interaction. This applies to the powerful as much as to the powerless, or vice versa. Both papers address some of those theoretical issues from a variety of standpoints, such as sociology, Hogarth, linguistics and philosophy, and Horty, Michel Foucault, Michel de Certeau, communication and semiotics, and modernist history, as in case of Thompson, even if accepting their limits and mixed features. Scholarship depends also on new evidence, and archaeological data has been a key player in the understanding of ancient world, and increasingly so, something evident in both papers in this session. This is so not only because of the explosion of archaeological finds, but also by the closer attention to ordinary people, as the instrumentum domesticum, but also as the instrumentum domesticum became the subject of a whole variety of specialists, dealing with amphorae, bricks, tile, lamps, and common pottery in general, among others. The same applies to the study of archaeological contexts to further the interpretation of the evidence. This also applies to inscriptions produced or commanded by non-elite or formerly non-elite people, as is the case oftentimes in both papers in this session. Studying ordinary people depends directly on the use of archaeological and evidence until the recent past. To my mind, the main issue, however, is a political one. What is the importance of ordinary people? There has been a long-standing tradition that the ignorant, the poor, and the marginal or subaltern are just irrelevant at best and pernicious at worst. The study of ancient excluded people is thus not really only about the past, and this is the main message I gather from both papers. Well, these are my brief comments, and then I will open to the audience. I don't know if there is a microphone for the people to talk. Yeah, so I will ask you to go to the microphone. There is a Pedro, so that you can, Pedro can bring the microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Macário. I'm from Universidade do Estado do Amazonas. I would like to ask you, to both of the lecturers, if they have any proximity with other perspectives that also want to write a new kind of history, not from the traditional elite point of view, like the colonial studies, post-colonial studies, and what do you think is the reason that in ancient history studies we have maybe some difficult to be seen as someone who is also fighting for a kind of history that is actually important to present issues, like, no, he studies ancient history, this is not for him. Like, in my university, I have this kind of reaction from the colleagues all the time, and also when we talk about history from below, and I come from a university that's small, is a new university. We come to big universities like USP, and we are, comes from very far. Oh, that's so good that you come here. It's also a way of putting down some kind of hierarchy that is not necessary or is not good for anyone, if you know what I mean. So I please would like to hear you on these issues.
Thank you for your question. Very good. Another person? Okay, let's go.
Bom dia. Vou agradecer os dois palestrantes pelas falas, em primeiro lugar. E a minha questão é para a professora Renata Garraffoni. Em um momento do seu texto, você afirma que os grafites são importantes para a compreensão dos grupos subalternos e pessoas, talvez, população marginalizada. A minha questão é, se você comentar um pouco mais o que você compreende por pessoas ou população marginalizada. Talvez uma implicância só da minha parte com o conceito, com a palavra. Se você entende como sinônimos, grupos subalternos e marginalizados, se meramente trata-se de uma população que carece do poder, do capital econômico, do poder e da influência política que caracteriza a elite. Caso sim, são marginalizados em relação a quê? Em relação a quem? Essa é a questão. Obrigado.
The question is about, what's your name?
Márcio Montenegro.
Marcio. The question is about the concept of marginality and its relationship to subalternity.
Félix, Université de Coimbra. Je voudrais poser une question au professeur Cyril Courrier. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas une tension entre la représentation individualisée d'un membre subalterne et la logique politique égalitaire qui valorise justement l'expérience de subalterne? Je pense par exemple aux travaux de Nicole Laureau sur le discours funèbre d'un Athènes classique, où elle montre que le discours officiel de la cité faisait l'hommage de combattants morts au combat de manière anonyme. C'est-à-dire que c'était le moyen démocratique de rendre hommage, c'était de ne pas individualiser quiconque, mais de faire un discours anonyme. Parce qu'on peut penser à cet exemple en Athènes, qui individualiser un subalterne, c'était tomber dans la logique aristocratique épique de rendre hommage individuel au lieu de la communauté. C'est ça.
The question is from Coimbra. Your name? José Lins. Félix. Félix. From Coimbra. It's about the fact that he asked him about or both, I didn't understand. But anyway, about the difference between the ethos of ordinary people is understood as collective, so that they would like to be anonymous instead of following the logic of the elite.
Kostas Lassopoulos from the University of Crete. Thank you very much both for two very fascinating papers. I think both of your papers raise the issues of the need for some kind of epigraphic methodology about how subaltern groups are represented in graphic material. And my comment is about the need to be very clear about what I think is a very significant distinction between the Latin-speaking Western Mediterranean and the Greek-speaking Eastern Mediterranean. What I'm going to say is an impression. It would take a collection of the full evidence to actually prove that my impression is correct. But there are some very significant differences in that respect. For example, my impression from looking at the inscriptions of the Greek-speaking Eastern Mediterranean is that even in the Roman imperial period, it's extremely rare to find people that mention their profession, for example, in their epitaphs. And I get the impression, I don't know very well, I don't know in detail the material from the Western Mediterranean, but I get the impression there is a very significant difference there. Secondly, slavery. Slavery is very visible in the epigraphic evidence of the Western Mediterranean. It's extremely, it's much less visible in the Eastern Mediterranean. Try to count the inscriptions where people mention that they're slaves or freedmen in the Eastern Mediterranean. Even in Roman imperial times, outside areas with strong Roman influence or where you have inscriptions in Latin, it's extremely uncommon. In particular, if you look at the Greek mainland, even in Roman imperial times, you can count inscriptions mentioning slaves or freedmen, not 2 hands, but maybe 3 hands or 4 hands. There are that few. Not because the numbers are not there, but because there are different epigraphic practices that make social hierarchy and social status invisible in the inscription itself. And I think the implication of that is that the phenomena you describe in the Latin-speaking West are clearly significant, but one has to ask why the choice to mention the profession, why the choice to mention the status of a slave is much more prominent in the Latin-speaking Western Mediterranean than it is in the Greek-speaking Eastern Mediterranean. And that's a question we really have to address to move forward.
Eu vou...
Last one.
Lucy Grig from the University of Edinburgh. I think my question is maybe more for Renata, but really for both of you. Something that hasn't come up when we've been talking about subalternity so far has been gender, which has been an interesting point. And in the case of the graffiti in particular, I think there are opportunities to think about gender relations and how they might fit in. So if either of you have any comments on the role of gender here, obviously not so much in our inscription de la Grande Mornaise, but that's my question. Thank you.
Eu vou aproveitar meu lugar de poder com o microfone e fazer uma pergunta à professora Garraffoni. No curso que a senhora deu aqui para a gente, nos subalternos, aquela apresentação sua sobre os grafites de Pompeia, a gente viu uma que tinha um verso de Horácio. Você lembra? E você disse na sua apresentação que analisar as inscrições por si mesmas como expressão dos subalternos, dos grupos populares, pode nos ajudar a entender o ethos da common people, né, das pessoas comuns. Como essa inscrição particular, por exemplo, que menciona um verso de Horácio, pode se encaixar nessa sua investigação? É uma pergunta mais pontual, assim.
The question is about the fact that in in Pompeii, there is a reference, for example, raised by Renata elsewhere about Horace, so that he's questioning what we can imagine, what we can conclude of this presence of classical literature, high cultural literature in the walls. So let's go to the replies. Renata.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think they are very thought-provocative. Maybe I should start and try to do it in the sequence. So let's see. Yes, I really think it's important when we are working with this kind of evidence to try to establish some kind of a dialogue with post-colonial perspective. And this I included gender studies. For me, it's very difficult to understand all this universe without nowadays thinking on post-colonial perspective and gender. So even if I didn't explore it here in this paper, I think they are very important. And mostly, this become important in this all this dialogue, because I believe that as Brazilian, let's say, we have to answer these questions that you said for our colleagues here and our colleagues in Europe. So we are always being questioned why we're doing ancient history. And I think it's very interesting this way. And nowadays, considering the renew and the new universities we have in Brazil, and students coming from different and very different backgrounds, they are always asking this question. So I think this kind of question is a local question, let's say, in Brazil, but it's a challenge to think how we connect this universe. And I don't think that it's just our problem, because maybe it's, as Funari pointed out, a sociological problem in our way of establishing dialogues with North American theories or European theories. No, it's we have a long tradition in trying to solve this, and I think that we have lots of important professors here in this university that deal with these challenges. So I think it's something linked to the way Brazilian historiographical or sociological work or anthropological has been doing, let's say, as a kind of a tradition. So I think these questions, they pop up in our minds frequently because we are in a we have a place in these discourses and in this situation that we should understand and try to establish some dialogues with. So I'm not sure as if I have a very objective answer for this question, but I think it's a way we constitute our thought about how to deal with these things. So I think it's important. And sometimes post-colonial theory and I believe gender studies, as they ask us questions and their questions are mostly epistemological, I think they are important to be listened for to see how we deal with all these things together. And I also think, yes, and I do agree with Costas, that there are lots of differences. And I mentioned this book because it comes from a workshop. And for the first time, these questions, they are all put together. And we see clearly, and we see this interesting thing that we have inscription that was not maybe written by subaltern groups, although graffiti, when they pop up in this discussion, is most time to say, oh, people, we do not have just the official literature, we have other types of writing in Latin and so on. So I believe this kind of debates and workshop has been showing us that we need more studies in this area. So I think that in the moment we are right now, as far as I can understand, it's a moment to discuss methodological issues. So this, I think, is your question is the question people is doing themselves and trying to look and to see how we can go far beyond from where we are. So when we put those inscriptions together and do this kind of thing, workshops, and see different perspective, we started thinking that maybe what we understand as the norm, considering other works, may be the exception, I don't know, so because we are sometimes very linked to our own object. So I think this kind of, like we are doing all these 2 days, I think it's very important. As if you want to propose new things, we need to listen to everybody and see where to go. Anyway, even if we don't have the same paths, let's say, but we need to talk more about our types of inscription and so on. So I think it's very important. And another question he asked about what I'm calling marginalized. I think this is an issue here, and I really think it's important. I don't know as if when I was writing the test I made myself clear, but I understand marginalized sometime by us, modern people, because there's some kind of, there are evidence, but sometimes we don't understand them. So I think that there are some ways of understanding. So let's see, for a long time we believed that women didn't write, for example. And there are lots of graffiti on women writing. So when I think about marginalizing, I also think about how historiography builds itself. And in this point, I must assume I'm talking from a feminist perspective. So there is a marginalization in this way of how sometimes we deal with evidence. And this can put some kind of questions and people out, and not very frequently being questioned. So I think it's a thought-provocative thing I'm saying here, but I'm thinking marginalize in this way. Sometimes we, as a scholar, marginalize some subjects. And subaltern could be marginalized in some points of history, but also women, and there comes the last part of my answer, if I make myself clear, Lucy's question. So that's why I think we need not only look to the evidence, but also discuss epistemological issues. This doesn't mean, I believe, that we are just going to talk about, let's say, theory, but we need the evidence. But sometimes we don't see the evidence, and the evidence is there. So I think it's some problems with how we look at it. So it's a modern epistemological stuff, and not necessarily an evidence problem. Of course, in some contexts, there is no evidence. I can understand that. But what I think is interesting in this graffiti is that there are evidences, and sometimes we do not study because it's bad Latin, it's not official Latin, it's scratched in the walls. They are not in the way, the place they were. Some were destroyed. We just have it in written because they lost it. So there are lots of, let's say, lots of lack of and fragmentary issues we have to deal with. So the way we reconstruct this, we must think about what we are doing, how we're doing, what is our methodological thing. And in the end, I believe it's an important question to us, why were we doing this? So I think, I'm not sure if I answer all the questions, but I think all these things comes together. And the graffiti, as they were marginalized also as sources. They maybe can make us think in different way in this condition. So, and the last one about Horacio, it is for Pedro. Yes, I said we should, let's say, think about how scholars define their evidence, or which kind of typology they are doing, as if we were dealing with epigraphy. And there are lots of epigraphy that comes from what we called this literature, what we call literature nowadays. But this is why I think Keegan's point of view is interesting, because he tries to make it not so separately. Because people knew it by heart, they were taught about it. And sometimes they wrote it in the walls. And they wrote it in a way that there are repetitions in different parts of the city. So in this other paper, I was collecting those evidence and, discussing with a group of students there. We at the university, we were working in the hypothesis that the idea of variatio, that is an idea, let's say, common in literature, and as the way they organize their literature, it can be also a way of inscribing graffiti, but in another way. So maybe it can be Horacio, or maybe it can be a joke on Horacio, and so on. So these things are in dialogue. That's why I think we should look at more carefully, and not to just make a dichotomy in between what is popular and what is elite. Because I think this kind of evidence makes this a little bit blurry, the limits on this kind of dichotomy. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you, Renata.
I will try to be quite concise, because we are all hungry. For the first question, perspective in post-colonial studies, it's the main reason of the project. We are all here, I'm here for this, to learn from Julio, to learn from others, and enlarge my European vision of subaltern studies. So it's quite the main reason of this project. For the relation between marginality and subalternity, I think it's definitely not the same, because subalterns in antiquity are often appear often as profoundly integrated to the city. They are confident in the city, and they move in the city. So the concept of marginality is cannot be the only one. It's impossible. If we do this, we miss all the dimension of cultural reasons of these social stratas, and so I don't think it can be the only one. Sur la relation, je réponds en français parce qu'on va poser la question en français, j'en profite. Entre autoreprésentation et démocratie. Alors oui, les travaux de Nicole Leroux étaient évidemment fondamentaux pour cet aspect-là, et expliquent très largement l'invisibilité des milieux dans l'Athènes démocratique, dans l'Athènes de Clisthène. À Rome, le problème est très différent, puisque la République romaine, et l'Empire encore moins, n'étaient pas des zones de démocratie. Au contraire, je crois que l'autoreprésentation dont les subalternes font preuve est une influence de la culture gentiliste, de la culture aristocratique, de la concurrence qui innervait toute la société romaine. On n'est pas face à des cultures qui sont indépendantes, et il ne s'agit pas de retrouver une culture populaire autonome, tout en bas, bien jolie, qu'on est prête à décrire. Non, l'influence de la concurrence gentiliste, je crois, pèse sur la façon de se présenter comme des individus exceptionnels, notamment les individus qui sont très proches des élites sociales, et qui, en 2 ou 3 générations, arrivent même à entrer dans ces milieux. Ils en reprennent les codes. Alors ce qui est intéressant, c'est qu'ils en reprennent les codes tout en gardant des traces de leur propre milieu social. Si l'on pense à Rome, au boulanger Marcus Vergilius Eurysaces, on a un individu qui fait tout pour imiter les élites sociales de Rome, pour faire comme s'il en était un, le bourgeois gentilhomme, si vous voulez, mais qui en même temps le fait en rappelant ce qui par essence le condamnait à ne jamais entrer dans ces milieux, sa fierté professionnelle. Donc on a des milieux, j'avais dit ailleurs, imparfaitement aristocratiques, incomplètement plébéiens. Je crois qu'on est sur ce genre de considération, et que les choses se posent de manière différente entre Athènes et Rome, pour le coup. même si, dans l'invisibilité des plus subalternes, la conséquence est la même. For Costas, I would say we might do a difference between slaves and liberty, because the libertus has something to claim, the slave not, and it's really important. And about the why, it's the object of the conference, of the foreword, and I would say, in the same perspective, think about the Sewiri Augustales from Arles. Why this one hidden their professions of negotiator and not in Lyon, not in Narbonne? I don't know. I don't have the answer to this.
The question about Greece, he answered that it's a very different case in relation to Athens, because Athens was democratic and the Roman society was aristocratic, so that there is a culture of the elite that was going to the poor people in general, so that they were, as he mentioned, influenced by the culture of the elite. But on the other hand, he mentioned also the fact that he mentioned in the lecture and also in the answer that there were problems of identification of these people with a community, for example, a corpus, like he mentioned a baker who is proud of bakery, for example, and others who prefer, as he suggests, avoid the reference to the way someone acquired their richness, so that he avoids this. So there are the two different tendencies in the common people in Rome.
Can I add that the influence functions also in the other sense? We have, we made this in the course of this week, we have traces of cultural influence of subaltern milieu on elite stratas.
Both ways.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the lectures, very good lectures, and for the questions, and for the audience in general. And I will invite you to come back to this auditorium at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We now start our last session of this conference. Let me introduce you the professors that are here. Professor Paulo Nogueira is a doctor in theology by the University of Heidelberg and professor at the Universidade Metodista de São Paulo. And at my left, Lucy Grig, that is senior lecturer in Roman history at the Department of Classics of the University of Edinburgh. We will start in chronological order, so early Christianity first, after late antiquity. So, Paulo Nogueira, you have 30 minutes for your talk. Então, apresentei a vocês o professor Paulo Nogueira, professor da Universidade, doutor pela Universidade de Heidelberg e professor da Universidade Metodista de São Paulo. Professora Lucy Grig é doutora pela Universidade de Cambridge e professora de História Romana no Departamento de Classics da Universidade de Edimburgo. Vamos começar em ordem cronológica, primeiro o cristianismo primitivo e depois a antiguidade tardia.
Good afternoon to all. I would like to thank you for this opportunity, especially to Julio Cesar for the invitation and to all people present here. For me, it's important to have that space of dialogue because the subject I will be leading with is not as common in biblical scholarship as one could think. I would like to ask you forgiveness for my poor English. It's English I use once a year in the Society of Biblical Literature. So it's a good opportunity to use it now because I'm not attending to the Congress this year because of the Brazilian crisis. So, okay, I would like to present some topics of my research project. It's a project I am starting with FAPESP. It has been approved, but not yet very well executed. So the questions here are very fresh in my mind, and I would appreciate your criticism and suggestions. So I would like to speak first about the perspective of this project. That is, I would like this time to focus not on social stratification, but on the question of how the Christian religious movement surges in the combination of categories and issues of the popular culture to which it belongs, and how it configures itself as part of it. My point of departure is that early Christians were poor, not only poor, but they belong to this social strata culturally. They belong to what we call popular culture of the Roman Empire. And as such, they articulate their lives and their religious ideas from this starting point and try to configure out their lives in the society in this context. So the issue is the perception and configuration of the world in the perspective of these lower classes, which we call then popular culture. So I have to add to that in biblical scholarship, in New Testament scholarship, there's a lot of work on poverty, social unrest, inequalities. Early Christians are treated as poor, as oppressed, as marginalized. But the issue of popular culture in itself is very rarely approached. We have history of religious ideas in early Christianity, which includes mostly the New Testament theology or the ideas from the patristic, from high-level Christians, or social histories that considers their lives in class struggle or in relation to their social condition. I'm inspired in this research by two scholars, Robert Knapp, in his work Invisible Romans. I don't know if you are acquainted with that. It's a very interesting book. It's not a very technical one, but I like that he uses parallel sources in order to reconstruct the life of this 97% of the population of the Roman Empire. And among its sources is the New Testament. I love this, that the New Testament is used in that direction, what biblical scholars normally don't do. And I love also the work of Jerry Tonner, Popular Culture in Ancient Rome, which gives a very strict definition of popular culture as strategy for administration of life in a society which has limited resources. In order to study early Christianity as popular religion, we have to proceed to chronological and sources delimitations, like, I prefer, in that regard, the narrative genres of the New Testament and of the apocryphal literature. I will justify that later. It's interesting that although early Christians were poor or not literate, they produced lots of literature. This is funny. We don't have until the end of the 2nd century material culture witnesses from this period. There is no documentation. Maybe this Alexamenos graffiti with this cabeça de burro, como se diz isso? Do you know that? A donkey, the donkey head, this crucified Jesus with a donkey head, the god of Alexamenos. But we don't have churches, we don't have material stuff from this period, Christians were irrelevant, unimportant. They didn't have churches, and so what we have instead are their accounts, lots of accounts. And these accounts are funny because they are not beautiful, they are not sophisticated, they are always flirting with the grotesque literature. It's bizarre literature with gross miracles, things that are that demand faith in order to keep reading the texts. And I would like to apply on this, to research on this. I think discursive genres are kind of social experimentations. When you write accounts, you render the word, and the literary genres, in sense of Bakhtin, Mikhail Bakhtin, are social experimentations and guides for life. Not only a way to present themselves to society, but also the ways they establish the word as they understand. So the apocryphal literature is very important. And of course, extra-biblical material like the Greek magical papyri that I have is my third testament, because they have religious practices that in some spells evoke Christ and Yahweh, and this kind of syncretic material, I think, is a privileged window to the popular. I think it's also necessary to work with a long chronology, not only the first century. I disagree with the early Christian studies area in England and in the US, which say we study Christianity from the from the year 100 on to the 6th century, because there is a specialized field, the New Testament area, which works with the earlier texts. I think this division is not possible, it's not justified. It's canonical, it's an academic way to protect the canonical division. I think early Christianity forms in the first three centuries a kind of system of language with metaphors, with accounts, with plot, with morality. That means in order to be recognized as a religion in the early 4th century by Constantine, and in order to be accepted as a licit religion in the ancient world, they must be recognized as a system of language. And in order to keep this web of churches, web of communities, it's necessary also to have a web of language. It's a semiotic concept of popular culture in this regard. So early Christianity is not only a designation of a religious group, but also of a social and cultural level. I'm in this research not considering the church fathers, for example, those who engage in apology or treatises, tratados, como se fala, treaties, okay? Because they are trying to establish communication with the elite levels and with the elite culture. Okay, so in order to proceed with this research, I created it's a working definition of popular culture and exclusively applied to this context, okay? So I will read and then explain some aspects. Popular culture in this sense is a set of religious practices and representations of common, non-elite men and women, by means of which they manage social tensions, rivalries, violence, social asymmetry, and resources shortage for their survival. The texts, rituals, gestures, etc., they create are concrete. That is, they aim practical functions and, at the same time, are structurally complex. In other words, endowed with poetic power and polysemy. These practices and representations come from the material world of these people, even if only metaphorically. Nevertheless, they can proceed to adaptations of elite genre and themes in their own perspective. In the case of the adaptations, prevails the active reception of the texts as imitations or in inversions by means of parodies, satires, and others. Okay, after our presentation, I would like to have suggestions and criticism on that, but the fact is that I assume that popular culture is always directed to survival under very hard conditions. Okay, what I call resources shortage, without a legal system that protects them, and under internal asymmetries and disputes. But these responses they give to reality are at the same time polysemic and poetic. I don't say beautiful, okay? I don't say beautiful. I am not working with a romantic aesthetics here. Although I appreciate popular culture in its own, but I think those accounts, those symbols, spells, they also can be reinterpreted. That's why we are working with this subject today, I think. Okay, then I have some presuppositions about popular culture, which I would like to share with you. And then I will read. Acho que eu perdi a página. Página 10. Ah, okay. So, the first one is that popular culture does not aim coherence or systematic character. To the contrary, given its strongly metaphoric and narrative character, we frequently find in its expressions fragmentary, ambiguous, contradictory, and grotesque elements. The task of the interpreter is to cope with them and not to look for a certain coherence and rationality as they can be found in the elitist culture. This is very important for us as interpreter, not to look for rationality or for kind of political engagement that makes sense for us today, but to understand in their own language. The second one is popular culture has an all-over circulation, is a culture for all society. It does not remain restricted to a group. It crosses and influences broad sectors of society. Even it is a resistance culture in some of its manifestations. It's not a culture of a protest group or of a sect, but it virtually pervades the whole society. Indeed, popular culture stands in process or constant circularity. I like this idea from Carlo Ginzburg of cultural circularity, that stuff from the elite is appropriated by the subaltern groups, and other way, popular ideas are also appropriated by the elites. Although they are antagonists in certain aspects and interests, they do not behave one in relation to the other in a excluding and dualistic form. It's necessary to pay attention to the dynamic reception processes between both of them. Then, even if popular culture pervades the whole society, its expressions can be studied at best at a local level, given the concrete and pragmatic character of its organization. Its practices and representations are organized in relation to groups, places, traditions, rituals, gests, and images. Popular culture is a place of power dispute, internally and externally. Inside the popular culture, there are disputes for agency and leadership, like, for example, between magicians or prophets. And popular culture is generally viewed with disdain and prejudices by the elite culture. This conflictive aspect coexists with the appropriations that are made on a profounder level. Popular culture coexists with the rhetoric of exclusivity of religious groups. This is an important point that I will lead treat with more detail below. The rhetoric of exclusivity with the Christians developed in face of their context appears as an apparent imperative for its analysis in relation to popular culture. That means Christians say, we don't belong to the world, right? We are saints, we are God's people. So we could conclude they are not popular culture. They differ themselves, separate themselves from the whole society. Okay. Do these elements not point to a religious group that is developing at the margins of culture and that avoids syncretistic relations with its surroundings? Should we not study, therefore, Christianity in the first centuries as a movement of resistance against the empire and as a negation of the polytheistic culture inside which it was born? Would they not have intended to be an alternative for their society? So I would say yes and no. Okay, that's the rhetoric of early Christians. They say we are different, but the categories, the mindset they use in order to say that belongs to their culture. They are in relationship with the big cultural system of their society. They are adapting literary genre. They are using metaphors that belong to all people, maybe in new perspectives, but we cannot believe too quickly in this kind of rhetoric. I will keep this aspect in page 12, please, when I will speak about yes. The other side of the same coin, that we have to have a comprehensive definition of what means belonging to Christianity. Many interpreters of Christianity in the first centuries transfer pious and sophisticated models of adhesion, can we say that? Adhesion, or conversion and following of Christianity of his or her own time and institutions to antiquity. We have to remember that biblical scholars are priests or pastors or people engaged in religion. So the fantasy as if there were, behind the letters of the accounts, prophecies and exhortations of these old texts, concordant men and women in pious and erudite posture. Fact is that we nearly do not know anything about the form how these people showed their adhesion or how they present themselves as Christians in antiquity. That's a good departure point. We don't know anything. What means to be a Christian? A Christian is something that believes in all the New Testament doctrines and dogmas. Which parts of the New Testament? Since there are big contradictions among the texts. What kind of beliefs? With which intensity? We simply don't know. We cannot simply suppose that, I am giving an analogy, that all Brazilian Catholics have the doctrinarian sophistication and institutional engagement of a Jesuit or a Dominican. The same goes for Protestants. To be Protestant is to be to have knowledge of all Calvinist doctrines and practices. I adopt on that. So, I would like to, in order to respond to this question, adapt a a scheme of Sheikh Cohen in his seminal work, The Beginnings of Jewishness. In his work, he asks, what means to be a Jew in the 1st century AD? What means to be a Jew? So he constructs a model arguing for a wide adhesion to Judaism. He says, to belong to Judaism is not determined ethnically, but culturally. And he says, pagans could present themselves as Jews or as sympathizers to Judaism or as worshippers of the God of the Jews for different reasons. From adhesion stricto sensu with circumcision and conversion, or to intermediate forms of adhesion like adopting Jewish alimentation rules because they thought them healthy, or respecting Judaism because of its monotheism and its ancient legal system as superior forms of religion, or also more general adhesion forms because the God of the Jews has the fame of being powerful, so that he can be invoked in magical rituals and formulas together with other powerful gods and goddesses. And Cohen says, someone that invokes Yahweh in the magical papyri is practicing some kind of Judaism. This is very provoking. So, this comprehensive definition of belonging in several modes in a broad spectrum can be, in my opinion, applied to early Christianity and would allow us to explore possibilities of religious Christian practices among the lower strata of the Mediterranean populations. Among people who have little interest or even little skill for theological issues or sophisticated intertextual playing with Jewish scriptures. Indeed, many of these religious practices took place in the dynamic space of orality. Variant invocations of Christ, references to the God of the Jews in the papyri, in the magical papyri, to the angels, to the scenes of life of Jesus and of the apostles, practices of prayer, of commensality, and even the use of amulets with gospel passages would be indications of a generic belonging that allow us to understand the adhesion of a broad stratum of the population to Christianity. This openness in the concept of adhesion to Christianity in antiquity is necessary because it's study based exclusively on its hardcore, whatever this might have been, does not allow us to enter into the universe of the popular, of the religious practices of the illiterate, and into the processes of cultural translation which take place on these frontiers. According to this broad project, we cannot presuppose that the confession to the Christ and the exclusivity of any adhesion from him to him were prerequisites. It could have been sufficient to adhere in one of these forms, even the most general, so that we can relate people or popular groups as practitioners of Christianity. This relaxation of the criterions of belonging would bring us to a dynamic consideration of the relations of Christianity with popular culture. So I think I'm almost finished with time, so I will hurry up. And I come to the second point, popular as reception by inferior strata of society. We know that early Christian literature emulates somehow elite literature, and I think it's interesting to see how they, for example, use the plot of the Greek novel. The Greek novel has a plot of lovers that meet each other, love themselves intensely, but are separated by fate or by the gods, and they remain chaste, and after perils and adventures are reunited again and marry in their cities, like in Ephesus or in Syracuse. Early Christians don't celebrate marriage, as you know from the work from Peter Brown, the Body and Society. Early Christians had huge problems with sexuality, marriage, and reproduction. And the apocryphal Acts of the Apostles, we have those plots inverted. The apostles, Paul or John or Andrew, they marry spiritually a matrona without sex in order to be a kind of Edenic couple. I think this is a kind of inversion, adaptation from elite themes that would then fit and adequate for our consideration as popular culture. And I would say the comparative approach is necessary in different literary genres and artifacts. I will finish with 3 access doors to early Christianity. Well, I have chosen these 3, but for sure there are others that I have not considered here. I think one of the most important are the magical practices. Magical practices, because magic is always related to concrete contexts, is always problem solving. It's difficult for us in the 21st century to understand that or to recognize that, because we have this bias, this modern bias against miracles. But the fact is that people practice that a lot, and a big collection of spells and procedures, technical and complicated procedures, survived, and we can then have a glimpse in this kind of solving problem techniques in antiquity. And they range from having a lover, finding in having a lover, or to get healed from headache, to get job, or not hurry in a battle. That's, I would say, lived religion in its hardcore. So, and the second point is that the space of domestic relations, because in this early Christian narrative, we have lots of domestic, how we say, like novellas, you know, this drama, intrigue. Is it called intrigue in English? Intrigue, yeah. Of lies and suspicious, and jealousy, and so. And if you have curiosity to read the Acts of Peter, it's very interesting. You have all sorts of domestic problems in there. And I would also recommend you to read the Shepherd of Hermas, or Pastor de Hermas, where we find dreams of a former slave. Nobody's concerned with dreams of slaves in antiquity, but we have that kind of stuff in early Christian literature. And in the third point, that's what I'm doing now with my research group, trying to understand the narration modes from texts that come from orality and from folklore topics. In the 2nd century, early Christians insert in their accounts speaking animals, lots of animals speaking. In the 3rd century, monsters are speaking, demons, dragons in the wilderness, like in the Acts of Philip. They then push their narrative accounts to the imaginative, to the grotesque, and I think that's popular culture in its highest level. So I think my time is out, and I thank you very much for your patience.
So I pass now to Lucy Grig for your talk.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you. I would start, like other people, to say thank you very much, especially to Julio Cesar. It is a really wonderful thing to be here. I first met Julio in 2012 when he came to Edinburgh, and I never imagined that I would be then in Brazil. So obrigada. I just have some slides to go with my paper, so you know where I am talking about and some other things. And I hope my paper will work. I think it works nicely with that of Paulo. So yes, the aim of this paper is to examine the methodological options for examining ancient religion from below. That's the theme of the conference, given the problematic status of the concept popular religion, which is what I'm really wrestling with here. In particular, I will consider how the model of lived religion might provide an alternative approach to that of popular religion. And then my discussion will focus in particular on my own current research on lived religion as popular culture in the south of France, in southern Gaul in late antiquity, focusing on a particular case study, that is of remedies against hail. And I checked that hail is granizo, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm going to start with a quote from Peter Brown, who Paulo has already mentioned. You cannot avoid him when you work on religion in late antiquity. And so this is in his classic work, The Cult of the Saints, written in 1981. And this has been so influential. So Brown wrote, "The model of popular religion that is usually presented by scholars of late antiquity has the disadvantage that it assumes popular religion can be understood only from the viewpoint of the elite. Popular religion is presented in some way as a diminution, a misconception, or contamination of unpopular religion. Whether it is presented bluntly as popular superstition or characterized as lower forms of belief, it is assumed that popular religion exhibits modes of thinking and worshipping that are best intelligible as a failure to be something else." So Peter Brown's words have long been axiomatic for me ever since I first became interested in the history of religion back when I was an undergraduate student many years ago. And for a long time, I've taken it for granted that popular religion, as normally used, is irredeemable, unusable as an approach. I could cite further another very influential approach, that of Natalie Zeman-Davis, on how the concept of popular religion has been used in her words to separate the grain from a chaff, an excellent agricultural metaphor. However, the problem for me when rejecting the approach of popular culture is that I work precisely on popular religion. I work precisely on popular culture. So how am I to reconcile an approach which rejects the idea of popular religion but is all about popular culture? So just briefly to look at that, and I find that my definition matches very nicely with Paulo's B about all over circulation. So is that working? Uh-huh. This would be easier. So I take very much my starting point. Popular culture is from the work of Stuart Hall, the article Notes on Deconstructing the Popular, which if anyone hasn't read, I think it is for me, the most important thing written. And so I take my starting point when he says, there is no whole, authentic, autonomous popular culture which lies outside the field of force of the relations of cultural power and domination. Popular culture is not a thing, it is a dynamic relationship. We can use it heuristically, we have to use it in terms of a political understanding of popular culture. And so I think this is probably the definition I give in the introduction to my book. Popular culture needs to be, and this again fits with Paulo's definition, should be understood inclusively rather than exclusively. It does not belong to a particular group of the population. It need not necessarily originate solely from the bottom up. Popular culture can be shared by various subgroups, and it can have diverse possible relationships to elite and official culture, and yet at the same time it is engaged in a struggle between dominant and subaltern forces. So, working with this model in mind, I've been reflecting on the possibilities for reconfiguring our approach to popular culture. In particular, I thought that recent scholarship working on the theme of lived religion seems to offer a potentially helpful way forward. Yeah. And so we come to the work of Robert Orczy, who I think is one of the most thoughtful and illuminating scholars in the field, and he describes lived religion in this way. The study of lived religion explores how religion is shaped by and shapes the way family life is organized, for instance, how the dead are buried, children disciplined, the past and future imagined, moral boundaries established and challenged, homes constructed, maintained and destroyed, the gods and the spirits worshipped and importuned, and so on. Religion is approached in its place within a more broadly conceived and described life world, the domain of everyday existence, practical activity, and shared understandings, with all its crises, surprises, satisfactions, frustrations, joys, desires, hopes, fears, and limitation. Religion is really everything, pretty much here. Now, lived religion is a concept that is increasingly attractive to scholars of ancient and late ancient religion. You can see, for example, the new journal, Religion in the Roman Empire. There has been a huge research project from your Grupke, sponsored by the European Research Council on lived ancient religion, questioning cults and polis religion. So it's been a very influential movement in the study of ancient religion. The benefit for me is that the idea of lived religion allows us to bypass the problematic value-laden definition of popular religion and allows us to conceptualize ancient religion as something definitively embedded in society and culture. Religion in the ancient world, as has been widely recognized, is something experienced, something which embedded and permeated all areas of life and culture, and ritual played an important role in this experience. There is so much I don't have time to say here. Moreover, the notion of lived experience religion also highlights and helps illuminate debate and conflict over religion, both in late antiquity itself and in its later study and reception. So back to something Renata was saying earlier, we're talking about marginalized practices, not just in the ancient world, but in the way that later scholars, particularly the pastors and priests that Paulo mentioned, have constructed what is religion in late antiquity. So we're still dealing with that. So, most practitioners of lived religion like to stress the idea of religion as something created by individuals, as an act of creativity. So Rubina Raja and Jörg Grupke have suggested that Michel de Certeau's concept of appropriation is useful here, that lived religion focuses our minds on the strategic selectivity of the individual agents making prefabricated meaning one's own. So you can see this is very much de Certeau's idea of religion as appropriation and ideas of bricolage. What is important, which is different from a traditional popular religion approach, is that lived religion approaches insist that all religion, including the allegedly normative religion, even of the church fathers, is constructed in this fashion. Everybody's religion is constructed in this way. In this way, it does away with a binary opposition of popular and normative religion. Nonetheless, the fact remains that although, and I accept this, all religion is constructed, the power to assign legitimacy to particular forms of religion is strictly limited. This is very easy to see in our late antique religion. Some forms of religion are authorized and others are not. In late antiquity, not all versions of religion, religio in Latin of course, were considered equal. Preachers told their congregations that their practices were not true religion in order to discredit them. As in a much-cited story told by Gregory of Tours, where the bishop of Javol in the Auvergne told the worshippers of a lake cult, nulla religio est in stagno, there is no religion in a pond. This could work the other way. Sometimes congregations could tell their bishops, oh no, this isn't religion, this is just fun. But unfortunately, it's much harder to see this working in favor of the subaltern. So one of the most useful aspects of the studies in lived religion is a fresh approach taken to religious blending, what used to be talked about as syncretism, an important characteristic of late antique religion under examination in this paper. Another influential scholar of lived religion, Meredith Maguire, has pointed out that all religions are necessarily syncretic and continually changing as people try to make sense of their changing social worlds, including other cultures with which they came into contact. And so helpful concepts
with which to examine and interpret religious blending, she suggests, include creolization, again, an important theme in post-colonial scholarship, and bricolage, an influential theme in post-structural scholarship and cultural studies, including, of course, as I've said, the interpretation of popular culture. When looking at these different contingent blendings in detail, we have to see individuals as well as communities in action, frequently engaged with relative autonomy as active agents in individual as well as collective eclecticism and bricolage, as Maguire says it, and to look for the struggles and contestation that are at stake in the forging of religion, culture, and indeed tradition. Lived religion, therefore, seems to work perfectly as an approach to the history of popular culture, looking at the construction of culture through appropriation and contestation, just as much as through reproduction or consumption. Where my own approach diverges from that of a number of the scholars working today on lived religion is in keeping society, community, and indeed class in mind, as well as focusing on lived religion as the construction of the individual. And I think this is where much of Rupke's project has been. He wants to get away from thinking about polis religion and thinking about religion as an individual. And of course, there are many implications, including political ones, to think about the individual instead of the community. So what I'm aiming to, Robert Orsi, I think he shows how you can still keep community class in mind. He has a close study of the lived religion of Italian Harlem as a very fascinating model of how communal religion can be read with an eye to the social, economic, gender structures of the community. In my own work, I'm trying to give an alternative view of religion to that provided by the clerical sources, the patristic sources which dominate the study of late antique religion. And therefore, I see my work as providing an important element of history from below. So for the rest of the paper, I'm going to focus on a case study from my ongoing research, which looks at popular culture in the context of social and cultural and economic change in southern Gaul, in the south of France, in late antiquity, which is a great place to work on. Wrong way. Yeah, I can't see this at all, but there's a map. Yeah, I really can't see this, but you'll just have, I'm pointing somewhere. Here we have southern Gaul in Provence, and I'll be talking in particular about the area of the Alpi, as we shall see in a moment. So we're going to start with a passage from the life of a saint, the Vita of Caesarius, Bishop of Arles. And this is an account of this very famous miracle that had occurred on an estate in the Alpi, the hill range to the northwest of Arles. So, right here, so here's Arles, we have the Alpi. Nice, rocky area with, as is important, vineyards. So, yeah. According to the Vita of Caesarius, written soon after his death, in around 540 by his close clerical associates, the following very famous miracle occurred on an estate in the Alpi. Constant bad weather kept destroying the property of a certain very noble man. The rain was most destructive, and powerful hailstorms devoured all the produce of the area. Every year, therefore, there was no hope of assistance for the place. It then happened that Caesarius' staff, his baculus, was left there by accident. This is when the bishop makes these, they're quite prominent in the second book of the Vita. He travels around his metropolitan area and the region of Arles in particular, keeping an eye on his congregations. And it's very important in the later clerical construction, the idea that he is a preacher to the people who travels around. So he left his episcopal staff at this place by accident. From this staff, the owner ordered a cross to be made. Fortified by his faith, the owner put it up in a prominent place so that the staff of the disciples and the cross of the master might counteract the incoming hailstones. So he makes a cross out of the staff. In honor of his servant, God deigned to work so great a miracle that after he'd driven away the bad weather, he made the place very fertile. This is just one of a number of miracles recounted in the Vita of Caesarius, which involve miracles effected by the bishop himself through the agency of his possessions. And this is a second miracle effected when he has left his staff behind somewhere. And what I find particularly interesting about this particular miracle is the way in which it can be paralleled with other practices and other objects from the archaeological record, which give us an insight into lived religion. Whether it's religion from below is the question to ask. So hail is a particularly feared phenomenon in the pre-modern world, and indeed today I was just looking it up and I saw there were terrible hailstones in Santa Catarina earlier this week. But in the pre-modern world it's obviously particularly frightening. This is the image is it's a hailstorm in a Carolingian manuscript. Even better, I gave a related paper in Cambridge, and there was a Byzantinist there who worked on Georgia, and he said, oh yes, in Georgia they fire rockets to protect the crops from hail. And then, yeah, so you can find all these images of the rockets that they fire to protect the vineyard from hail. And he told me that there was definitely some interesting local politics protection racket going on in terms of the local I don't know what you call him, but the local protector, really, and there were definite certain relations of patronage and protection going on, which would then enable the local people to use these rockets. And so we just need some imagination to try and think about how similar practices and operations and relations would have happened in late antiquity. So, hail is a particularly feared phenomenon in the pre-modern world. A whole range of remedies against hail were used in the classical Mediterranean, some of which, as detailed by the agronomists, we heard about Columella yesterday, in particular are rather hair-raising. Palladius, the example I find the most spooky is Palladius talks about crucifying an owl. But there's others, including menstrual blood and seal skin and all kinds of things. As well as performing rituals and reciting spells, more permanent solutions to the problem of hail included the use of inscribed objects, charms, talismans, amulets, phylacteries, various terms are possible, in situ. These inscribed objects sought to banish the demonic forces seen as responsible for the hail. A number of them survive, hailing from different areas of the Mediterranean, made from a range of different material, from metal, lead, and clay. These have been found and studied. Some of them appear to have been buried in order to be more efficient. Others have holes showing that they were hung up, like Caesarius' staff. And so this is the example here. This is from Tunisia, published by Odelon. And so here we have a lead cross charm. It's quite big. It's 34 centimeters high, about this big. Clearly it was hung up. It has a spell inscribed on the front and the back, although whether you could have seen both sides when it was hung up is a question. And there is a huge amount of text containing some familiar language and some quite hard to understand. If anybody wants, this was an appendix to the paper, I can send you this. So here are the crosses. So this comes from North Africa. I don't have a map, but interestingly, the region in Tunisia looks like it has a very similar geography and geology, so the same kind of climate where hail would have been a problem as in the Alpes. These objects are also found in the south of France. There are 2 bronze tablets dating from the 2nd century CE, which are inscribed in Greek, which is interesting again. They sought to claim the assistance of the popular demon Abraxas and another demon who was otherwise unheard of, whose name was Oamutha. Even more directly comparable with the staff charm are these late antique examples, like this one from Tunisia, but also found in other areas of the Mediterranean, including Spain. fashioned in the shape of crosses and generally designed to be hung up. The shape of the cross, it was seen to have particular power against hail and more than hail. Interestingly, in the case of Caesarius' staff, we can see a double sort of power signification. The staff itself, the baculus, is often seen as an attribute of divine or magical power. So it's a kind of doubly powerful. It's the shape of the cross and it's the staff, the viga. Now, generally these objects that have been found are inscribed. The text from the Vita of Caesarius does not mention any text on the LP charm. Caesarius of Arles himself would have been very deeply disapproving of the texts inscribed. He has many sermons when he complains about these dubious texts. Anyway, a host of literary evidence testifies to the role of clerics and indeed saints in the battle against hail. So great, as I've said, was the threat it proposed to agriculture and viticulture. Gregory of Tours, as so often, has a number of stories in this vein whereby saints prevented hailstorms, thus demonstrating their powers as thaumaturges. Of particular interest is a tale from Gregory of Tours of how he himself was able to stop a dramatic storm with the aid of a gold medallion that had belonged to his father, containing the ashes of saints. And again, what we see here is the role of an object in transmitting divine power that seems to be particularly effective. In the Eastern Mediterranean, Theodore of Sicyon, who has a fantastic life story, erected crosses to prevent hail on several occasions. In the fullest account given by his biographer, he prevents hail from attacking vineyards in the village of Reace with a ritual that included a procession of supplication and circumambulation of the relevant areas. So circumambulation is a very common anti-hail ritual, as indeed a common ritual in general. But it also involved placing a wooden cross at each of the four angles of the boundary of the field. However, figures of spiritual authority, saints and bishops, didn't necessarily need to use objects to stop hail. In fact, in most cases, we just don't know what they used. In late antiquity, a whole range of ritual practices, blending diverse elements, were widely accepted as legitimate protection against hail. A law of Constantine's against magic is interesting in this context. So this law excludes innocent remedies against hailstorm alongside other supposedly harmless remedies from prosecution. As you see in this text of Constantine, he explicitly distinguishes between kind of bad magic, which is making people fall in love and attacking their enemies, with innocent assistance that he suggests that is innocently applied innocenta attivita suffragia in rural districts in order that rains may not be feared for the ripe grape harvest, or that the harvests may not be shattered by the stones of ruinous hail, since by such devices no person's safety or reputation is injured, but by their action they bring it about the divine gifts and labours of men are not destroyed. So here we have a law of Constantine specifically saying that remedies against hail are okay, because they're protecting the divine gifts and the work of human labour. And it's interesting that this law was reissued in the Codex Justinianus, even as against a context of generally harsher legal response to magic. So in the East, this law is reissued, the special dispensation for anti-hail magic is allowed. But as I work on southern France, where we have close to the Visigothic kingdom, I find it very interesting to see that in the post-Roman barbarian kingdom, there's a different the opposite approach to this hail magic is made. When this law is repeated in the breviary of Alaric verbatim, an interpretatio is added that refers specifically to hail magic, and it makes quite the opposite point. And so this is the interpretatio at the bottom of the slide. Sorcerers, singers of spells, those who send storms, emissores tempestarum, or who disturb human minds by invoking demons, must be punished very severely. And this reminds us of the other side of the story of the hail magic. There are two sides to hail magic. On the one side, you can stop storms, but on the other side, you can start them. And so if you're a cloud driver, a tempestarius, you can conjure storms. This is a power that's sought over very much as well, but is clearly more controversial, to say the least. It is the former ability, the ability to bring storms, to bring hail, that is an issue of concern in a number of texts from the early medieval period, from the Carolingian period in particular. But it's not just the Carolingians who are up to it. Theodore of Sicyon, we should note, not only prevented storms, but on one occasion he summoned hail to fall on the crops of a village of Halios because they had failed to follow his advice over a local dispute, and so he brought hail onto their vineyards. I like the fact, Ramsay McMullen pointed this out, that in the English translation of the text, they miss this bit out. It's clearly not seen as a very nice way for a saint to behave. But again, if we think back to the role of the holy man acting as local patron protector, they can work for good or for evil. You think of the rich landowner in Georgia, he might let his tenants use the rockets, he might not. It depends whether they're agreeing to his protection in other matters. I imagine it's the same for Theodore of Sicyon. But back to Caesarius and the south of France. Caesarius himself had a great lack of interest in relics and miracles, as has often been noticed, unlike, say, Gregory of Tours. But even his own biographers took a very different view, so he's clearly an outlier. He does not represent Christianity of the south of France. He is really the exception. And an acceptance of the efficacy of objects and rituals to protect the land from hail was shared widely across society. It was definitely not limited to popular religion. Caesarius' hagiographers stress that this baculus cross was set up by a rich man, nobilissimos possessor. Likewise, Ferdinand's Nieto, who has looked at inscribed metal crosses from Spain, from Asturias, suggests we can surely detect here the hand of a well-to-do, far from unsophisticated Christian landowner, perhaps a priest. So these objects are often produced by literate and well-off specialists. So, if a concern with hail and ritual remedies against it cannot be ascribed to popular religion, can we nonetheless seek the popular angle? How does it help us write history from below if we say, oh, everyone does this, including rich landowners who have a lot of vineyards to lose? The medievalist Patrick Dutton, writing on Carolingian texts concerned with hail, notes perceptibly that different economic groups had different economic interests in the destruction of crops by hail. He speculates regarding the possibilities for economic advantage by peasants who could make accusations of hail conjuring as part of attempts to avoid the exacting demands of their landlords on their harvest. So it could be a bargaining talk. If they want to avoid their surplus extraction, they could argue that hail had been conjured and therefore had destroyed their crops. This can only be speculation, but I think it's an important way forward we could go. We can speculate also regarding the ways in which groups of peasants and religious specialists could have interacted, as in the case of Theodore of Sicyon, who both drives away hail and brings it on, especially if we imagine them operating in a competitive religious environment. And so looking at bids for religious patronage could act in both directions. Sometimes the local community would have something over the religious specialist who wants to convert them. But from the perspective of history below, moreover, and crucially, the treatment of hail conjurers certainly varied depending on the social class of those involved. It would have been a relatively well-off landowner who could commission an elaborate charm, such as the lead cross from Tunisia, or an anti-hail charm from Asturias, or the bronze tablets from Provence. You might have to be relatively well-off to be able to pay off the local tempestarius, the storm driver. However, legal and ecclesiastical strictures focus their ire and their punishments on the powerless. Caesarius ordered the beating of those consulting enchanters and using diabolical phylacteries. In fact, He proposes corporal punishment for lower status persons, colony and members of your household, and tenants in a number of his sermons. Later on, in the 6th century, the Council of Narbonne first cancelled that diviners, and interestingly it specifies both male and female diviners, should be punished with excommunication and with a large fine, but then goes on to talk about specifically lower class specialists who are to be beaten publicly and severely and then sold. Our literary sources certainly suggest that many incantores, enchanters, were of sub-elite or non-elite status. Alan Jones's book is useful on gathering together the material on this. It was as such that these specialists could be so easily disparaged and denigrated and marginalized by our literary texts. And what we get here is a late antique continuation of what is a traditional Roman association of dubious religious practices, of superstitio, with lower status and despised groups, and indeed the role of women. Nonetheless, study of the general corpus of ancient and late antique curse tablets and related material clearly suggests they were used across all classes and indeed across both genders. Furthermore, ecclesiastical sources also firmly suggest that divination and amulet production were not uncommon and indeed profitable sidelines for clerics who clearly had the profitable advantage of literacy. Again, lived religion is something practiced by all levels of religious authority. And so therefore, yet again, it becomes clear that notions that any particular type of religious practice can be bracketed off as popular in isolation is just not tenable. We are not talking about a uniquely popular religion. As in the case of the staff hung up to repel demons in the bathhouse, what we have is a case of lay people appropriating a sacred object, in this case, the very symbol of episcopal authority, and using it to construct what we can again call lived religion. But the case of the Cesar's one, it's a noble landowner nonetheless. It's still harder to get at these practices as practiced by lower class people. And those of you who were here yesterday and heard Kim's paper, it was interesting that she said that she didn't find any religious material in her peasant project excavations, and I would like to ask her more about that, because elsewhere a lot has been found. So, as a provisional conclusion to a short paper from what is still my work in progress, I'd like to suggest that lived religion does provide a useful model to use in this context, but we need to very firmly contextualize the idea that individuals construct their own religion. In fact, individuals did construct their own religion, but as members of communities and as actors in grossly unequal landscapes of power. Landscapes that were unequal both in terms of ecclesiastical and social and economic power structures, and we need to keep on understanding them to be able to understand lived religion as part of popular culture, as part of history from below, and a part of our broader understanding of late antique history. Obrigada.
So, thank you very much, Lucy and Paulo, for your talks today, your papers. I will give some comments on your written texts. So even you, Paulo, most of my questions concern your largest paper, then your presentation here. And I will open with some general comments and then give some provocative thoughts for you. Well, it's a pleasure for me to comment on these two exciting contributions. Both of you deal with the subject of religion from a bottom-up perspective and in the wider context of popular culture. You, Paulo, just as you, Lucy, understand popular culture as an ensemble of modes of use, and especially the modes of reception and appropriation from below. For Paulo, popular culture would be defined as the perception and configuration of the world in the perspective of the lower classes. I quote you, a form of elaboration of texts, narratives, poetry, rituals, practice systems, moral references, and so on, with the aim of orientation and survival in society. Conceiving living religion as popular culture, you, Lucy, also understand culture through appropriation and contestation just as much as through reproduction and consumption, or consumption. Both authors here focus on the same kind of practice in two different periods. Both have chosen to set narrative texts in a broader context, comparing a wide range of evidence. Lucy has tried to parallel the Vita Caesarius with other practices and objects to give insight into lived religion. Paulo, for his part, has emphasized the importance of comparative method, a comparative method between several kinds of sources, texts of early Christianity, Greco-Roman literature, Greek magical papyri, manuals of dream interpretation, fables and legends, moral maxims, amulets, and so on. As I have mentioned in my introduction yesterday, their choice shows the importance of your choice shows the importance of an interdisciplinary approach in writing ancient history from below. But I would like to call your attention on your differences as well, which ultimately raises important questions for our reflections, and most especially on how we can approach religion from below. Unlike Lucy, Paulo maintains the validity of the concept of popular religion or religiosity, especially in relation to the origins of Christianity. His focus, your focus, Paulo, is on how a religious movement, early Christianity, serves in the combination of categories and issues of popular culture to which it belongs. For you, early Christianity, I quote you, early Christianity is not only a designation of a religious group, but also of a social stratum and a cultural level. For instance, magical practice, healing, protection, oracles that Lucy sees as shared practices across the social scale are for you, Paulo, elements eminently characteristic of popular culture and therefore of popular religions and religiosities, if I understand. One problem here, in my opinion, is that in spite of the insistency, your insistence on appropriation and contestation rather than on production, this classification seems to define such practice as essentially popular, and I have doubts about that. But was Christianity, for example, even its origins, exclusive to this social stratum and cultural level? As you recognize, Paulo, some of these practices that you define as eminently characteristic of popular culture, such as magic, were also practiced by the elite. In this context, how can we study this practice from the point of view of those who lay below? Lucy, for your part, Lucy, prefer not to talk about popular religion, but to consider lived religion as popular culture. Following Orsi, you define lived religion as a way to explore how religion is shaped and shapes the ways family life is organized. Religion is approached in its place within a broader life world. For you, the concept allows to bypass the value-laden concept of popular religion. But is popular religion necessarily a value-laden concept? And conceptualize ancient religion as embedded in society and culture that is experienced. But as you note, not all versions of religion were considered equal. Quoting you, preachers told their congregations that their practices were not true religion in order to discredit them, while congregations could told their bishops that their practices were not religious in order to protect them. So there is a division in this case, a polarity even. Hence the importance of looking at certain blendings in order to understand the struggles and contestation that are at stake in the following of religion, culture, and indeed tradition. The question, however, for me is, how could we see these struggles and contestations that are at stake in the forging of religion from below? Your communication insists much more on the fact that the acceptance of the efficacy of objects and rituals to protect the land from hail was shared widely across society, than on how these shared practices are differently appropriated. You certainly acknowledge that different groups had different interests in the destruction of crops by hail, and that the legal and ecclesiastical strictures focused their ire or punishments on the powerless, not the rich, not the powerful. As Carlo Ginzburg wrote in a critique of Peter Brown's book, The Code of the Saints, a focus on elements shared by an entire community have often tended to underplay tensions, divisions, and oppositions of all kinds within these communities. And just as Ginsburg, I also think that to abandon the more or less openly paternalistic spirit with which the religious history of illiterate groups has been studied is quite different from rejecting what Brown defines as a two-tier model, or any approach that presupposes the existence of cultural or religious dichotomies. Thus, even if we start with elements shared by different social groups, the main question, for me at least, remains, how could we effectively achieve a view from below? So I insist to point to the differences because I think that is a way to share, to let you to talk a little more about your points of view, but also because I think that our objective here is not to achieve a middle point, not to achieve consensus, but precisely that, to expose our different points of view and progress our thoughts. So thank you very much for your exciting papers. Do you want to comment? Yeah.
Thank you, Julio Cesar, for your comments. I think we always run the risk of treat our working definitions as essential concepts. It's always necessary to keep an eye on that and to be aware that we have always categories that work in relationship with other concepts. It's always contextual. When you ask, can magic be also practiced by the elites? I would say yes, but the contexts are different. My point of departure is always cultural, but I would say that in this regard, I would say that the social and economic context is very important. For someone to pray for healing or for job or for protection in a favela is different than someone that does that in another context. The appropriation does not apply in this case. So it's not essential. I always am looking. I'm not Marxist, but in that regard, I was this differentiation. Okay, the interplay of contexts of factors is always important. So the adaptations and consumptions in the lower classes, the lower strata. So praying is not an essential practice. Practice is always related to the context of who is praying. So I would say.
Thank you for your question. I think, in fact, you raised a crucial point. And I think I am in the process of changing my mind, because for so long, I thought popular religion is a problem. But you're right, does it have to be value-laden? Maybe we just need to think about a new conceptualization of popular religion in the same way that David Frankfurter in his recent book is reclaiming syncretism, saying syncretism does also not have to be a bad colonial concept. Maybe we can reclaim the idea. And yes, can I find genuine religious change from below? I'm still looking. But thank you. Your point is very, thank you for your response.
Well, now we can open for your questions. We have some time yet. Monica, Marcia. As this morning, you can present yourself, Monica, and from where you came from. Present your name and say where you came from and all the others. just a minute. Monica? You need to, because this is recorded.
Boa tarde. Hello, my name is Monica Silvatici. I come from Londrina State University, and I liked both presentations very much. And I see that from Julio's questions to both of you, you're questioning, or at least from the presentations, you think a lot and reflect about the term popular, right? And then so just food for thought. What about questioning the word religion?
Yeah.
Okay.
No time today.
Because and it's not on your on Lucy's. She works with late antiquity, but recently scholarship, New Testament scholars, early Christian historians, they are now saying, I've read that many times, that we cannot use the word religion until the 4th century, because earlier than Christianity as the church, religion as we know it comes from that time. And before that, something different went on. And it was religious practices, or I read recently an article by Paula Fredrickson. She's an early Christian historian, and she says, and she summarizes the issue like this. She says that religious identity for at least the 1st, 2nd century could be understood as ethnic identity, ethnos. I don't know if she synthesizes too much, but so how about working on the word religion? What do you think, both of you, what do you think of this new understanding of us not being able to use the word religion for ancient religious practices?
Monica, this is a very, very difficult question. So we are trying to figure out what is popular culture, and you come then with a much harder question. Well, in my department, I always say that religion exists, because there are colleagues that say, no, religion is an invention of the British when they came to dominate India, and so, okay. No, it's a kind of caricature of that, but, and I say, stop saying that, because we are such a small study area in Brazil, religious studies, you know, and we start saying that our subject doesn't exist, we will be cut on money and scholarships, because you never hear from your colleagues that politics and economics doesn't exist. So, well, but I would say religion exists politically. But I have to agree with you that I'm uncomfortable with the concept. So I would say, in this context, religion means the administration of everyday life by means of religious or symbols that are related to the disease, to angels, demons, gods, and that kind of practice. I don't believe in an essentialist concept of religion. But I would pass the question to my colleague. Well.
No, I think I would agree with Paulo. I once tried in undergraduate lectures on Roman religion to give them this analogy that religion doesn't exist, it's like eating, and they looked so terrified I stopped. But I think that is the point, because what late antique preachers are involved in this ideological construction of religion, which later has a colonial reiteration and so forth, and that does need to be deconstructed. So yes, I take your point. Definitely in late antiquity, we're dealing with something very different from in the early Christian period.
Posso acrescentar uma coisa? I would just add that I like the concept of religion as practice. I think this can lose somehow the conception, because many people think of religion as system of beliefs, dogmas, right? In Brazil, it's very common. Other Christians have dogmas and doctrines and fixed rituals. I would say in everyday life, in lived religion, we have practices that help organize in everyday life. I like that kind of conception. David Morgan, for example, is an American scholar that says about visual practices as religion practices, and people don't ask about the meaning of that. What's the theology of the cross, or just as such images you showed us. I think this helps us to refresh the concept, although I am still in crisis with it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Macario from Universidade do Estado do Amazonas. I will have to say it's very refreshing to hear someone talk about lived religion as opposed to a kind of Christianity constructed by the theologians of the first centuries of Christianity, which is something that I really am into. And the question I would like to ask you is, isn't the division in classical studies, biblical studies, history of late antiquity, a problem that it's hard to be overcome when we have to look to our objects of study from an interdisciplinary point of view, and sometimes we have similar ideas, but we just can't communicate well with our colleagues because of the institutional department structures and the division of periodics and journals and colloquia that are structured by traditional departments and so on. So I would like you to comment on that. Thank you.
This was this rigid structure, departmental structure, was one of the things I was criticizing when I have spoken about the division New Testament studies and early Christian studies, because it fits for departments, journals, congresses, for our academic politics, and doesn't fit for the early texts and artifacts we study. If we take Monica's question seriously, what is then religion, if not just a part of a broader web of meanings and relations, and right? And then we split. This belongs to the classicists. This belongs to people that study late antiquity or religion. Paulo, you can do that, but you cannot speak about politics, and so this doesn't mean this doesn't make any sense. So in this regard, I appreciated the interdisciplinary context atmosphere we have here in this conference.
I think all I would add to that is I completely agree, and I think our own institutional formation is crucial in how we approach history, and I think I study late antique history as someone who's in a classics department but was partly trained as a medievalist, and I think that's the way I do in an interdisciplinary training, and that is crucial to why I look at religion in one way and somebody else another, but I need to talk more often to Paulo. That's my conclusion.
Costas now? No. Okay, we have no. Three questions. Temos ainda 3 sessões. Okay.
Good afternoon. I would like to congratulate both of the papers and the authors. And I want to make two questions to Paulo. And the first of all is that one of your presupposition is that popular culture has like a circular movement in the culture and the elite. So I would like to think who is the mediator of this circular movement? Is the priest, is like some authority, like a spiritual authority, who makes this movement with the different groups? And the other ones is that you brought some definition about the that we have some economic interferences in the definition of the cultural popular. So I'd like to think if Paul, the apostle, and his epistles would be considered like a popular culture because he's like a craftsman. So can the New Testament and the Paul producer be understood like a cultural popular or not? And one question for the both of you. If we dilute the borders of the groups, like if I understand correctly, you are proposing, how can we identify a group? So that's my question. Thank you.
I do the first part, okay? Okay, thank you for your question and for your answer, because you did give the answer when you spoke about Paul of Tarsus. Okay, who does the mediation? That's a very good question. It's a part of paper I skipped when I would address this question: who is the guy who makes the adaptations? I followed under my medievalist, my guru, that's Aaron Gurevich, who says that there are some intermediate agents in culture, people that do the translations. In the medieval world were the monks, because they were peasants in origins, okay? They never born in monasteries, so they came with the culture of the villages, but they translated them, the church culture, ecclesiastical culture, to the villages and vice versa. And the same with Paul, because Paul is a Jew and a craftsman, a tent maker, right? But he is aware and very good in using rhetorical instruments of Greek culture. So he belongs to two worlds. Jewish, he's at the same time Jewish and Greek. He's aware of of some rhetorical instruments of the elite culture, but he's not a elite guy. So he's always making translations. If you read the first letter to the Corinthians, when he's comparing people who have no honor, people who were weak or crazy people for the word, but they are indeed strong and powerful and noble. That kind of translation is done by these intermediate agents in culture. I think also in this these anonymous authors of the Gospels, apocryphal Gospels and canonical Gospels as well, or the apocryphal Acts of the Apostles, people that can write, they are literate, but all their ideas come from below. And they adapt then the plots of elite literature. I find this absolutely fascinating and shows how circularity works in those texts and cultural artifacts. So Paul of Tarsus is emblematic in that sense.
The question of the different groups. You had in mind, how do we separate the elite actors and the intermediaries and the non-elite, or which groups did you have in mind? Oh, okay, yes. I think the boundaries are fuzzy. I was taken with Costas's paper yesterday talking about these community formation and blurred boundaries. Sorry, that's a very vague answer, but I think it is a good question. We can't see the groups as too bounded.
Thank you very much for two very fascinating papers. My question is this. The definition of popular culture that you used and the definition of lived religion that you used are both acronic. In principle, they apply to all periods, all places, all times. And yet, the kind of Christian community in the 1st or the 2nd century CE that you examine, or the kind of Christian community in the 6th century that you examine, was not only non-existent in 500 BCE, it was inconceivable. And the reason, of course, is that all sorts of changes happened between 500 BCE and the 1st century CE for that kind of Christian community to be possible, and so on and so forth. So, in the book I mentioned yesterday by Leslie Dossi, Peasant and Empire in North Africa, one of the things it discusses is how the emergence of Christian communities in North Africa gave new, with their forms of, their practices, their forms of communication and so on, gave new materials, new possibilities to rural communities in North Africa that didn't exist, or didn't exist in that way in previous periods. If we talk about slavery, once upon a time people thought Christianity was the religion of the slaves. And that's wrong, of course. And Christianity, of course, was the first religion to actually say that slavery was ordained by God. But Christianity, Christian texts are the first ones to address slaves as members of a religious community. And that didn't exist in previous times. So I would say that monotheistic religions is a new phenomenon which creates new possibilities, new challenges, and new problems for subaltern communities. Shouldn't we try to incorporate in our acronic models changes, transformations, and new phenomena that only emerge from a certain period of time and therefore affect history from below and subaltern communities in novel ways that didn't exist before?
I mean, yes, for sure. Although I think I probably don't really want to talk about the people I'm working on in Southern Gaul as a Christian community. I don't think they see, they don't think, oh, we're the populus Christianus. They think they're just people. Yes, I get your point exactly. I suppose in my own case, I'm just trying to get away from Christianization as a dominant narrative. Oh, everything is because of Christianity, which I am sick of and want to do something else. But yes, of course, lived religion in a monotheistic society is a very different, you're living in an entirely different world, so you have to have a contingent, specific analysis. I absolutely take your point, yeah.
Okay, I would say my definition is somehow acronic, but not totally. I am sure it does not apply to the modern world or for the contemporary world, because the question of the medias, TV and internet, and so makes everything much more intense and more complicated. I would say it applies to ancient societies, but you're right when you say it's even though generic, I should pursue a more compact and more specific definition. I think I should do that some time. But what I know is I have to invent that kind of definition, because when you open handbooks about popular culture and they start speaking about media in the modern world, it's not helpful at all, because the questions and the variables are too different and too intense for our subjects. The medias we are speaking are graffitis, oral traditions, written texts. Nowadays, it's impossible to use just these categories.
But we can look at this book, for example. Lucy Grig's Popular Culture in the Ancient World.
Everybody should read it, especially Julio's chapter.
Yeah. The concluding chapter, the last chapter is common for a late and ancient historian. Just the last question, because we don't have many time. Pedro.
Yes, I'll be quick. I'll present myself. My name is Pedro Benedetti. I'm a student of Julio. And I'm very happy for both of your presentations. And I would like to ask Lucy Grig and also Paulo and Julio. I was talking yesterday with my colleague Giovanni here. He studies the late antique Africa, and I studied the late antique Gaul. And we were talking about the difference of the popular practices of religion, because, Lucy Grig mentioned a council of Gallia from the Corpus Concilia Gallica, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was reading the one from Limoges, the council from Limoges, and there was a dispute because a bishop was nominated for 2 monasteries. And they were arguing about that nomination in a council, and we don't have any more about the outcome of this. It never started a big rebellion or nothing like this. It's nothing close to the Donatistic problem in Africa. So my question for you is, why is there such a difference of popular action regarding these religious issues in North Africa and in Gaul? Because the same issue, if it were in late antique Africa, it would be like a big social problem. There will be revolts, they will take churches and basilicas, and that's kind of my question. Thank you very much.
I think I give that one to Julio.
No, for Julio, we will talk about after the conference.
Limoges. Yes, now I feel bad because that's in the north of Gaul. They do things differently there. Why do religious differences lead to massive social movements in one place and not the other? I suppose it's, although some of the religious practices are very similar, so that you find the same objects coming from Tunisia to Asturia to Provence, other social formations do not come from the same milieu. And I'm waiting for Julio to tell me.
Well, unfortunately, we have to stop now because we have to take a coffee break, and after I invite you to return for the last session, the conclusive session of this conference. So thank you very much, Paulo and Lucy. Thank you, everybody. I invite you for the coffee break now. Bom, vamos então dar início à nossa última sessão. Let me start our last session, the conclusion of our conference. Renata, please join us. Cristina Rosillo Lopes has joined us as well from Sevilla for the conclusion. We as organizers of this conference are here now to talk a little bit about our impressions about this conference. Not really a conclusion, because as I concluded my introduction yesterday, we are just beginning a project, so it's not the time of conclusions, but anyway, we can...
Je vais commencer.
Cyril,
Before we begin to reflect on what we have learned, I would like to address special thanks to Julio. You have to know that is the real organizer of the project, of the conference, and without him, nothing would have been possible. It's really his baby, and we have to really thank you for this. So, if I may.
Thank you very much, Cyril. It's very kind of you. We can start perhaps with Cristina, and then Renata, Cyril, and I. Okay, Cristina?
Si tu veux dire un mot de la conclusion des débats. Formel ou scientifique?
Yes. I just want to say.
Le micro, Christina, le micro.
Le micro.
Oui, pardon. Sorry. Better in English or in French? I don't know which anymore. I just wanted to say, of course, apart from the thanks, that having experienced the conference, because I was sorry I couldn't be there, from outside, I've been following the YouTube, the conference from YouTube all the time. So it has been really fascinating. And I think it's a great thing that this has been recorded and it's available online, because I think it's a very good resource for all subsequent debates that are going to rise upon all these subjects that we had been going around from yesterday and today around subaltern, etc. So I think that also congratulations to Julio and the persons who have allowed all the people who are not there, including me, to follow all this, and especially because this would remain. And it's one of the things that makes conference so interesting, but at the same time it's always a pity that it's something evanescent. Then afterwards, sometimes you have a very nice volume, but you cannot have, for instance, the discussions. And discussions are sometimes the most passionate moments of exchange of ideas, and new things are tested. So that's why I think that this conference is going to be very important in that sense, that you have all those discussions available. So that's why I wanted to say.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
Yes, and I totally agree with Christina, and I believe that the idea is to, let's say, start a group with more frequently discussions and bring new issues and trying to be more open-minded about all these issues that we've been discussing. Sorry? No. Oh, sorry. So one thing that I would like to stress is that, as Julio said, we're not here for huge conclusions, but as a start point for some discussions and new projects on the area. But something that really I think it's important to stress is that in these 2 days I realized that lots of papers here comes from different case studies, but I think that everybody is a little bit worried about the limits and where should we go, maybe because of the conference theme and so on. But what really called my attention is that many of us are opening dialogues with another disciplines and also with another theoretical approaches. And we've been discussing with let's say, some classical studies like Thompson and so on. So I think it's interesting to relate is that we are searching for maybe new concepts or a new way of looking at the subaltern issues. And I believe that we are doing something and trying to discuss where the classics is also and the classical studies. So maybe this connection could be an interesting point to think from now on, I don't know. But it really caught my attention. And now, in this last section, I think it was really stressed in Paulo's talk and also to Lucy's talk, how many different authors from another disciplines and another areas, they put together to think about lived religion or concepts. So I think this might be some things for us to think about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Renata. Cyril?
For me, I would like to insist on the fact that the important now is to pursue, to continue. This experience has been for me absolutely fantastic. All these speakers all around the world, that was really awesome. And it's really important that we find a framework, an institutional framework to pursue our researches, which will be very interesting, I think. First, a publication, I hope, and then a second or a third conference in France, maybe, and then meet a new time together, because we had the papers have shown that we have enough work to do for the 3, 4, 5 years to come. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Cyril, Christina, Renata, for all your comments. For me, it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to bring all of you here in Brazil, in São Paulo. This is a really exciting experience. We have learned lots of things in these 2 days. Lots of problems also we have noted. The need to be precise about our concepts, the need to bypass acronic definitions, to think more about contextual definitions of the subaltern groups and the subaltern classes, indeed. I think in more dynamic ways about these questions. The importance also of an interdisciplinary approach, bringing in the same study scholars from different fields, from archaeology, ancient history, literature, and religious studies, and so on. It brings a different approach for our subject. And one thing that is really important, I think, is for a long time we had the practice of specifically located schools of thought, the Cambridge School, the Paris School, and so on. We are trying to do something different in the road of globalization, to think not from one specific place, but to bring about in a network scholars from several countries, several historiographical traditions, several traditions of thought about those theoretical positions, indeed. And so, as Cyril has just told you, our main objective here is to pursue this project. Start today, but continue for the years to come. I hope our second conference will be at Aix-Marseille, where Cyril teach.
We hope so.
We hope so. Aix-en-Provence, in 2 years, I think, 2 or 3 years. And to publish also, not only these conferences, but also to think in a real book, perhaps, inviting other scholars who could continue these questions from other points of view, from other methodological questions that we are discussing here.
As we have seen, this book will be quite methodological.
Yes.
And then we will be in the second conference how to continue to go further in this matter.
Yes. But anyway, I like very much what Christina said that we have here, this conference was recorded, so you can continue to return to these discussions and think about everything we had discussed these 2 days. But last but far from least, I would like to thank not only my colleagues in the organization here, but also my students. Without it would not be possible to do this without your support. So,
can we remain their name?
Rafael Mombean, Pedro Benedetti, Márcio Montenegro is at the end, Jéssica Nostolin, Giovanni Nascimento, Nara Oliveira is not here, Luis Giacomo, and I did not forget. Yes, Luis. Without your support, this conference will not be possible. So thank you very much. So thank you, and we are closing this conference. Thank you very much.
On se retrouve dans quelques minutes.